Hello? Hello?
I'd like to call this meeting to
Can't
order.
hear you very well. I'm on a phone call far away. Can you speak a little louder?
Okay, well, that might cause an interference. Sorry, guys. You're just gonna have to proceed.
Can we hear
Can
her?
we have her? Why don't we have her hang up, start the meeting, and have her call back in? Hey, can you hang up and call back in 30 seconds? We'll wait for you to get onto the call before we start the meeting, but you have volume control because you got on the meeting first.
Well, I have to do this phone number thing and meeting
Yes.
ID and password. It took a long time. I'll try it. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all right. So I'd like to call this meeting to order.
Oh, I guess.
Okay.
Ready.
Okay, so there's three of us here. Did you guys read the minutes? Yeah, from last meeting?
Oh, yes.
Yes, okay, so can we agree they sounded pretty close to what happened?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to approve the minutes.
Motion.
Second.
Vote, aye?
Aye.
Okay, the minutes are approved. We would like to have we're gonna run this meeting, we're gonna have the cemetery go first. We're gonna have them come up and we're gonna have the public hearing for that, and then we'll go to Abervite after that. Okay, so if the people who are for the Huguenot Street Cemetery could come on up. Okay. Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So.
Welcome back.
Welcome back. Okay, so do you have anything to add or anything like that, or?
Not unless you had particular questions. I think it was pretty straightforward. I don't know if there's public comment first.
Yes, yes. Is there any public comment for? Oh, I'd like to open the public comment section for the 181 Huguenot Street. No.
That's over,
Oh, sorry.
Mike, well, please.
I'm sorry?
Speakers also use the mic.
Oh, we don't have microphones up
Yeah.
here.
Yes.
Let me explain. There's one speaker microphone sitting in the center of the table that's gonna play audio from the Zoom. Anybody who's zooming in, it's also gonna record you.
Thank you.
So when it's your turn to speak, please join the table so that everybody can hear.
I can't hear you. Your voices are very faint and jumbled.
Yeah, okay, so we're doing this.
You're to the person on the phone, you're unable to hear Autumn. She is the person who administratively coordinates this, but your speaker is at the table with the board members of the zoning board. And the people who are speaking will be coming up here one at a time so that you will be able to hear them. Is that helpful?
Okay, that's great. And then I would like to speak also.
Okay, wonderful.
Okay, So we are talking about 45 and 60 Huguenot Street right now. So if there's any people who would like to publicly comment on 54 and 60 Huguenot Street. Okay, anyone, all right.
Should
so
I make my
let's-
comment now?
Are you talking about the 54 and 60 Huguenot Street, the division of the graveyard?
I'm the little red house at 65 Huguenot Street, right across from the graveyard.
Okay, so yes, you could speak right now.
I think what they're planning is a wonderful idea. And it's not going to change really how things look. It's kind of, moving a boundary here or there. And I just support it completely.
Okay, thank you. We agree with you.
All righty. I'm up here in Vermont looking at the snow.
Okay,
Wonderful.
all right, so we're good. Okay, so excellent. So can I have a motion to close the public hearing?
Make a motion.
Oh,
Vote aye.
there's nobody else there?
Nope, just you.
We have a room full of people.
Well, for
that-
heaven's sake, I'm glad I came.
Yes. This one was a knife edge. We didn't know which way we were gonna go. You definitely pushed it over the edge.
Well,
Okay.
tell me who's speaking from the zoning board, because I've certainly done things with you zoning board wonderful people before.
Oh, and also, could you tell us your name and for our records? And I am speaking, I'm Noah Simons, and I'm a member of the zoning board.
Great. Well, your name isn't familiar to me. I'm Dina Du Bois.
Your last name is familiar to me.
Well, of course. Du Bois Fort. My grandmother grew up there, and I grew up in the Bevere Elting house.
Okay.
It's nice to meet you over the phone.
Okay. All right. So we've closed we're gonna vote on closing the public hearing. Did we do that already?
I made a motion.
Okay, good. Okay, so we're closing the meeting. I don't see any problem with this. Does anyone see any problem with this?
Can we move forward with, can we,
Are we ready to make a decision?
I believe so.
Yeah, I'm ready to make a decision. on this.
Yeah, go through the 5 factors.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, so
Bring the list.
where's the 5-factor list?
Robert's
Who's
rules.
got it? No, that's the other list. You guys got it?
Well, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
the way the agenda was set up was that the 2 public hearings would be first.
Yeah, we're gonna finish this first,
Okay.
and then we're gonna go to the other one. Yep.
Oh,
So,
were you going to do this public hearings?
I'm just looking at the agenda, that's what the agenda.
yeah,
says,
we're
so
moving
go
the
order.
agenda around. We're gonna do this first, and then we're gonna get that done.
Objecting,
So that-
saying,
So where's the 5? Do we have the form that she filled out?
I do not, I just have,
I have most of it.
Do you have this form?
Order now.
Yep, you got it.
I'm not finding page 2. So, here's through 5.
Thank you. All right, so the 5 factors. The first one, the variance description just says that they're gonna move the line. Whether the requested area variance is substantial when compared to the reference village code sections. So do we think this is a excessive ask? I don't think so.
No, I don't.
Okay, all right. Will the proposed area variance have an adverse effect or impact on the physical, environmental conditions of the neighborhood of the district?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to make any difference. Is the alleged difficulty self-created? For example, a project was started. This is, I don't know.
I mean,
Everyone who created this has been
Yeah.
dead for 200 years.
yeah.
And everyone
It's-
in the graveyard is dead, so we can't.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
this
what's
this is
the
the
tell?
tough one.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, yeah, I think that it's okay.
I think it's not self-created in this.
Yeah, this may be one of the rare
Right.
ones where
Yeah.
I think we're
It's not, right.
It's not
reacting to
self-created.
something that happened so
You
long
have
ago
any-
that
I don't think
it's
it's
more of a
they're-
reaction.
It's not like self-created is usually when you move into a, you kind of come into a lot that's got all these problems with it or something like that, or this, I don't think so.
Yeah, I think
This is a solution.
This is
not a-
just, this is pretty
problem.
clear. I don't see any problems.
Yeah.
Okay. So, are we supposed to vote on this right now? Yeah, right? Vote on-
Yeah,
Okay,
once
yeah.
you go through the factors,
Yeah.
vote on the variance.
Yeah, I think I'm okay with this.
I'm comfortable voting.
You comfortable voting? Okay, so, I have a motion to make a vote on this.
I'll make a motion to approve the variance.
I vote for it as well.
Yeah, I vote for it. So, yeah, we have 3 yeses on this. Okay.
Thank you all.
No
Thank you.
problem.
Dina, thank you.
Well, I just think it's wonderful what the zoning board of appeals does. And thank you for getting me in.
No worries.
I tried to put all those letters in for the, to come on Zoom. Forget it. The telephone's for me. Thank you so much.
Dina,
Okay.
thank you very much.
Okay, so.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, so now I think we should I motion to open the public hearing for 181 Huguenot Street.
I'll make a motion.
Second it.
Vote.
Aye.
Okay, so,
Start by
I
it.
think the other thing, you didn't read about, like, what it actually was. And I was just, like, what you were, just a
Deciding.
variance to move something. But, I didn't know, I'm kind of like the next door neighbor, it's too late because you voted on it. But where are you moving it or?
Nothing's actually being moved. It's essentially there, like at the back of the cemetery behind the red barn. There's an extension of the cemetery now where they're going to bring some artifacts that were moved out of the area by ancestors a long time ago. They're working with the Muncie Indians to try to bring back things into the rightful place, basically.
yeah, and some of the area probably has graves in it, so it's just a way of making the graveyard one big place as opposed to some of the graves being on private property. So not private, but it's putting all the graves in one place.
Like moving a lot line.
Yes, that's all that was going on. All right, so,
There's any way you put this next thing's about so that we know.
yes, okay, all right. So, okay, so this, 181 Huguenot Street is a interpretation of action of a building inspector. So the building inspector, found some violations, and this is asking for this is asking for relief from the building inspector. Okay, so last week we introduced this. We're gonna have the public hearing, then we're gonna have the people come up and talk who are part of this, and then we'll vote on it. Okay, so if anyone would like to, so we'll go down the list. You want
Yeah.
to take care of that for me?
I am already in trouble. Jay?
Joe,
Oh, Joe. Looked like an A. I'm sorry. I'm doing.
Joe
such a
Spear?
poor job. Spooner? Joe Spooner?
oh, sorry,
I was right. with
you were
Jay.
right, I'm sorry, yes.
Would
you
you
can
like?
Come on
to
up or
speak?
talk, or,
No, okay.
oh, okay.
Amber? Yeah, so this isn't necessarily a list of, why don't we just start? Yeah, okay, so that's what's happened here. Why don't we just start with people in the front row who would like to speak? Raise your hand, please.
Yep.
Okay, let's just start with you, sir, and we'll zigzag our way across.
Okay, try to, there's a lot of people here, so try to keep it brief. Please tell me your name, and please tell me where you're from, and please tell me if you have any financial or links to the thing, like let us know who you are and why you're talking about it. So if you're the next door neighbor, just say I'm the next door neighbor, I live 3 houses down, or I work for this company, they're my boss. Just let us know where you live and what your name is before you start talking.
Mr. Chair, before we get started, if I may, just 2 things. First of all, I want to remind the board that what we're going to be hearing tonight, this is on an appeal. So this is not 5 factors. This is really a question as to whether the code enforcement officer's interpretation of the zoning code was a correct interpretation or should be overturned. And I would also ask the the audience, people who speak, to really speak as much as you can to that question of the interpretation of the code, which in this case was that the proposed application is not a home occupation. That's a particular decision. That's what the code enforcement officer decided. So to the extent that you can speak to that as opposed to more generalized impacts, it's going to be helpful.
Just to add to that, just as he said, so we're specifically asking about whether or not it's a home variance in conjunction to what the inspector said. So the quality of the business or whether or not we like the business is really irrelevant in this. We're trying to determine whether or not it's a home occupation, not whether or not it's a good company.
Okay.
So that's clear for everyone.
Ready? Okay. Hi, my name is Michael Zeeler. I live at 2 Henry Court in New Paltz, which is a few hundred yards from the property, 181. I'm going to speak tonight in two capacities. I'm going to first speak as a neighbor and as a resident of New Paltz, but I'm also a member of the Historic Preservation Commission in the village, and I was asked at our meeting last night to speak after a 5-0 vote to speak in my capacity as a commissioner of Historic Preservation Commission, but first as a neighbor and citizen. And I apologize, my comments are directed to Chairman Saraceno, who apparently is, that's not you?
No.
Right, didn't think so. So with that correction, yes, I will be happy to. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you. So there were two conflicting opinions which have been rendered by two different building inspectors. The first opinion, which was made by Corey Worthman, the previous building inspector, determined that the use of the Arborvitae School of Traditional Herbalism at 181 Huguenot Street met the criteria of a home occupation according to section 212.28 of the Village of New Paltz zoning code, and by reference, the definition of home occupation in section 212.5. A few months later, the current MCO, Alex Salinitri, delivered a differing opinion stating the aforementioned proposed use did not meet the criteria of a home occupation. We do not know from the letter that Mr. Worthman provided what his reasoning was that led him to make his determination, but I do know from Mr. Worthman's tenure at the village that he was reasoned, fair, and thorough in his deliberations and decisions. As a former planning board chair, my tenure overlapped with his, and I can say from experience that in the frequent discussions we had about applications, zoning code, and building projects, that he was always reasoned, fair, and thorough. There's no reason for me to think that Mr. Salinitri is any less reasoned, thorough, or fair than is Mr. Worthman. Based on my conversations with Mr. Salinitri, I'd say that the two are equals, and we should judge both of their decisions pertaining to 181 Huguenot Street in that light. So the question for you is not which is right and which is wrong, but rather on what basis should you deliberate on this appeal before you. As a neighbor of 181 Huguenot Street, it's clear to me that the family living in the house are wonderful neighbors, kind and generous people, and importantly, that this house is their home 365 days out of the year. For 341 of those days, it is entirely 100% their home. And for one weekend a month over 8 months, they share their home with the Arborvitae School. During those 24 days, it is true, as Mr. Salinitri said, that approximately 50% of the square footage of the interior of the house is transformed into a school. But on those 8 weekends, when Sunday afternoon draws to a close, 181 Huguenot Street is again just a residence. As a neighbor, the only signs that tell me that school is in session are a handful of additional cars parked on the property and a large cache of shoes and boots that are set on the front porch. Mr. Salinitri made the determination that the infrequent use of 181 Huguenot Street as a school was not a home occupation, based on a determination of the fraction of the square footage of the inside of the house that becomes a school during those 8 weekends. Our zoning code, though, says nothing about using square footage as a metric for deciding if the home occupation is incidental and secondary to the residential use. Again, we don't know what metric Mr. Worthman used, and if he did use fractional square footage, then apparently he came to a different conclusion from Mr. Salinitri. At your previous ZBA meeting, your attorney, Mr. Gordon, described what the intention is of codifying a home occupation usage. In summary, The purpose is to ensure that any use designated as a home occupation will not alter the character of the neighborhood or disturb neighbors due to noise, odors, or other activities as a result of the home occupation. As you deliberate on this appeal, please place significant weight on the following. The Arborvitae School utilizes 181 Huguenot Street just 8 weekends a year. That when school is in session, they do not generate undue amounts of noise, no noxious odors, far, far less traffic than the weekly farm share pickup that happens a bit further north on Huguenot Street. And the school is in session only during reasonable daytime hours. In other words, the school, when it is present, and that is very infrequently, has very little impact, if any, on the neighborhood. You may be aware that many neighbors of 181 Huguenot Street have made it clear through a petition that the school is welcome in the neighborhood. I know I speak for many of them when I say that after you have deliberated and weighed these two building inspector opinions concerning the Arborvitae School and 181 Huguenot Street, we hope that you will decide that Mr. Worthman's opinion takes precedence over Mr. Salonitri's. Thank you again for the opportunity to address you, Michael Zeeler. So that's my comments as a citizen. And for you, just what I read, so we have that. Thank you. Just a few brief comments from the village's HPC, Historic Preservation Commission. So there was on June 13th of 2023, we submitted comments to the village board and the mayor regarding this same use. It was actually prior to their request for a home occupation. So it was about whether they could. Yeah, it was about the use variance. So relevant to that, we had some discussions about proposing some code changes. And so this references that. I'm not going to read the whole thing. So I'll just read excerpts. The commission's primary responsibility is the preservation of the historic character of the Huguenot Street Historic District, and we as a commission can find no negative impact of this use on the historic character of the district. Specifically, we believe that one, Arborvitae's commitment to agriculture honors the agrarian past of the property in the district. Two, both its agricultural and its educational instructive activities are a very low impact use of the property. And three, its preservation of native plants and traditional herbalist practices complement the property's historic character. Community support for the activities of Arborvitae is very strong, and our commission finds that its activities have, on the whole, a very positive effect on the historic character of the Huguenot Street Historic District. Sincerely yours, Tom Olson, Chair, Historic Preservation Commission. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Chair, before the next speaker, I just want to clarify a point that Mr. Sealer made, referring to a point that I made, which I characterized, I think, pretty accurately, my comments from last week. I just want to be clear that my comment as to what I thought the basic intent of the zoning law is simply my own opinion, not even particularly well informed, just an impression that I'm getting. Of all the things that I'm going to tell you, there's probably the least, I'm going to tell you, as we get into this, probably a number of legal issues that we're dealing with that the applicant has raised, that the appellant has raised. This is the least reliable because this is just my own opinion from my own interpretation. And in fact, this, to the extent that we get to this question of, on the substance, this is really where you come in as the board. It's your decision, and you are the people who live in the community, not me, and are the experts on the zoning law. So this is just a suggestion, a suggested way to interpret the facts from me in terms of the impact on the home occupation is really all about letting people do what they can in terms of impression without really impacting the neighborhood. But you may come up with an entirely separate conclusion based on your own analysis and what you hear and what you think, and that is the one that you should go with. So this is of all the things that I tell you, this is the one you should rely on the least. But take it if you think it makes sense, you can use it.
All right. So June, you want to come up?
I'm June Wheeler, lived in New Paltz on Prospect Street. Well, I've lived in New Paltz since 2003. My 3 children have gone through the schools. And I've lived on Prospect Street, so I'm not a Huguenot Street direct neighbor. But I've known, are we arguing that this is a home? Someone's living there and using this building as their home? Is that what we're trying to establish?
People are living there as their home. The question is whether using this as a school for, the Herbal School is consistent with what's called a home occupation. Typically, and this is sort of a classic example, this is a little bit outside the ordinary, as the appellant even said. Home occupation is a way, like if I'm living in a single family home in a residential neighborhood or residential zone, but I'm an attorney and I can, let's say, work a number of days in my den. That tends to permit that type of activity as an attorney or as an accountant or as an architect, where I, turn on my computer and I have my own little office, and that's a home occupation. It's obviously broader than that, but that's the concept, is it lets you do a commercial activity that would otherwise be in a commercial zone, but in a residential zone. And so the question is whether this use fits within that exception, that allowance of commercial activity in a residential zone. It's called a home occupation.
And to be clear, we're debating, there were two inspectors that overlapped and they had different.
Well, in particular, this is an appeal from the second decision.
Yes.
They're asking to reinstate the first, but the second decision is that it's not a home occupation for the reasons stated in that decision.
Okay, yes, Michael is very clear. That makes sense to me. It does seem odd that the esteemed Corey Worthman's opinion was, had to be weighed in on again all these months later. I'm just sort of curious how that came about, but since I can't speak to that, I'll speak to the family who lives there, who.
You can speak to it. That's one of the objections that the appellant has raised a number of questions about the second decision. One of which is that the CEO should not have made the second decision because there was a first decision. So that's actually one of the objections that was raised. That's got a little bit more legalistic in terms of whether he had the right to do so or whether we should have done so, which is, I suppose, less legalistic. And so you can comment on that because it's directly before the board.
Okay, then I will. So in the intervening, 8 months or so since Mr. Worthman made his decision, the family has been living there. I've walked with them down Huguenot Street to go trick or treating. I've walked with them walking their dog. I've taken turns with other neighbors if there needed to be, babysitting done. They, absolutely live in that home. And I'm the vice president of the board at Elting Library. So, Amber has done some programs at the library and also at Gardner Library that I've attended, and to establish that she is working from her home in the business that she does. I mean, she's brought white pine branches that have fallen. She would never pick something off a tree to snip that into her herbal remedies that she's teaching people how to use in just a brilliant way. I mean, she's managed to integrate her longtime desire to live in New Paltz with this opportunity to be, caretake the house in order for there to be 8 weekends of classes there while she moved her children, her two, younger than middle school and grade school, uprooted them from New York to make New Paltz her home. And it was because of this being able to live in this house that was all possible. So I think Corey Worthman's original decision was clearly right on. Yeah, that's all. Keep it short.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Do you want to speak?
Judy definitely wants. If I know Judy Mage, Judy wants to speak. Hi, Judy.
Not all the time.
Not all the time.
Okay. My name is Judy Mage. I live at 171 Huguenot Street. Between me and 181, there's nothing but a field, big field. So I can see what's happening there. And
Judy, can you talk louder, please? Oh.
Okay, so what I'm saying is I have visual access at all times to this house, so I see what is happening there. And what is happening there is just maybe once a month or so, there are more cars, but a couple more cars, because most of the people who go to the school park in public lots now. And that was an adjustment that was made because of questions that were raised about the amount of cars. So that, I think there was a really responsible decision on the part of Amber and other people from the school. Most of the time, this is a house that's occupied by a mother and her 2 kids. I see the kids, I play Frisbee with the kids. I wrote a letter that you should have copies of.
We received.
What I want to emphasize is the consequences if an interpretation was made that forced this family out. For 2 years at least, I don't remember exactly how long, nobody lived in that house. After Farmer Noam, whose name I always forget his last name because I had such problems. Anyway, when he came, I thought, well, that's nice. We'll have a farmer and all these farm fields and everything. And the next thing I saw was Farmer Noam in my backyard putting up a fence along the marsh. I'm the last house on the marsh on Huguenot Street. And you know what I mean by the marsh?
Yeah.
Okay, it's open water really. And he felt it was very important for him to build that fence. Why? No reason. I mean, I thought it, you know, I've been friendly toward him and everything. There he was in my backyard, suddenly putting up a fence on the edge of the marsh. He said, well, I own the 3 feet at the edge of the water. A couple of days ago, the water came up halfway up the hill, so whatever you, but anyway, he didn't give me any notice or anything like that. So I had to live with that kind of person. And then once he left, I've had to live for a couple of years with a dark house and with a lot of fear that that house could be, talk about home occupation in the positive sense, that there could be a home occupation by people that would not be such a good use of the home, that there could be of activity going on. I mean, the house was dark, the house was empty, except for a little light burning that, as I said in the letter, the real estate person asked me to keep an eye on that, because if the light went out, it would mean that the electricity would go out, the water lines could break and the house could get flooded, and that would be sad. So finally, when the people come, nice people, decent people, with an interest in growing herbs, what can be more agricultural than growing herbs? It doesn't make sense to me that there's some kind of narrow interpretation. Most of the 90 acres of the Jewett land is growing corn. So that house has, whatever kind of business you call it, it has to do with helping people understand the importance and the uses of growing herbs. That's it, herbs. And so to me, to return to a situation where there's nobody there, or where there might be some hostile people there, as Noam became very hostile, not just to me, but a lot of people, it doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't make sense. And I hope that part of the purpose of the board is to do things that make sense for the people involved, for the neighbors involved. You know, and it's not just me that feels this way. You know, I know my neighbors. I have lived in that house since my son was 6, so in 1978, I bought the house with the help of my then partner. And so in 1978, Farmer Jewett was the person who lived there, and we were friends with Farmer Jewett. And he was a really nice man, and you know, no problems. And then after he left, there was a gap, and then we were friends with people. But I fear that if it became impossible for the people living there now to stay there, goodness knows what would replace them? Maybe a long period of nobody. The people who own the house, I don't think are very actively looking for ongoing tenants that would meet the qualifications for their occupation. But there are people there, they live there, there's no question that they live there, I see them there all the time. And I just hope you'll do the sensible, just thing and let that happen. Thanks.
Thank you,
Do you have
Judy.
any questions?
We can't ask you questions. We can't respond to you. We can't talk to you at all. That would be against the rules of order and would be illegal. So we can't, you can tell me that you saw aliens there and I just have to believe you. Like you can totally lie to me right now, by the way, it's completely legal. So don't let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Aliens.
Okay.
Orange you would do.
Yeah, okay. So just so you guys know, we are completely aware to a very high degree that the company is wonderful. All three of us have spent, at this point, 3 hours listening to how wonderful they are. Okay, so if you're going to come up and tell us how wonderful they are, please do it as quickly as you can. Okay, like they're wonderful. We love them. Great. You're aware, right?
I'm aware.
We're aware, you're aware. We're aware. We're also aware that the people are living there and we're also aware they're really nice and have children. We have heard this for 3 hours. Please use some brevity because we have we have a lot of people. We're going to let every single person talk, but please, if you're going to say that they're really nice people, just say it and we believe you. Okay, there's no questions. You come up and talk. That's all there is. We can't discuss back and forth. So I'm not arguing with anyone. I'm not discussing anything. We have to listen to you. And we're going to go from front to back. And so you're next in the second row. Sure.
Precedent, the worry is the precedent that would be set by this?
No, it's just how meetings are run.
No, I'm talking about
The actual-
the occupancy, the precedent, it's that if they have a business, who knows what might happen to the next person who comes in.
The decision was made by someone else.
Right.
It
Okay.
counteracted.
That's what we're,
But the answer is, that's a secondary concern, I suppose, but the bigger concern is whether this is a legal use.
right,
I mean,
now, for now, for this.
well, suppose they wanted to hold, a professional baseball game there or something like that. We wouldn't be talking about whether it's a precedent, we'd be talking about whether this is an appropriate use. So the question is this too big, is this inappropriate for this, in this particular situation as a home occupation or not?
Right.
The answer when the board answers that question, down the road, it may or may not become a precedent as the village adapts to that. But the question for us in particular is whether this is legal under the code, whether it's a home occupations and complies with the policies, with the spirit that was intended by enacting the home occupation laws.
Okay.
Okay, we're not doing this anymore. I'm cutting you off. Second row, first person on this side. Do you want to talk? Okay, would you like to talk?
I will yield my time. I
Okay.
letter.
Okay,
Yeah, we
good.
received
read
all
we
of
read
them.
all the letters. We read them all. Okay.
The only thing I'm hearing tonight that worries me a lot is that there was a ruling and somebody based their life on it. And then somebody new was appointed to that seat and made an opposite ruling. I mean, it doesn't, I didn't think laws worked that way. I thought you could count on the ruling standing, talking about things being grandfathered in, for instance. I wrote this little letter of support. My name is Margaret Human. I live in 67 Mill Rock, which is actually in the town. And I was very pleased to learn recently that there's an herbalist in New Paltz giving occasional classes. I do not get very far from home these days. I hurried to get on Ms. Merkin's mailing list. The northern end of Huguenot Street seems to be an ideal spot for this home occupation, and the presence of an herbalist who teaches the use of the healing plants is a blessing for our community. Thank you. Can I hand this in somewhere?
Sure.
That's weird.
Yes, thank you. You give it to Autumn, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Miriam Strauss. I live at 143 Huguenot. And although I've been there not quite 10 years, I've been in and out of New Paltz for almost 40 years. I've had dealings with Mr. Worthman that have all been positive, and this in the framework of moving into a place and having to adjust some things there, and also being in the historic district. So there were a lot of constraints, and everything was positive and professional. So I was very surprised and disappointed to find out that there had been this revision of his decision, because my experience with my good neighbors has been that they are good neighbors and that they are residents with an absolutely minimal impact in their home occupation. Even if they're not sitting at a computer, in the sort of classic example, this is a trivial impact on the community. Many of the people come up through mass transit or carpool because it's the same cohort of people. It's not a tractor trailer school. And I say that although I used to go to one. So I think that you should return to Mr. Worthman's ruling. And as far as that goes, having been a farmer at a certain point, I was thrilled to see them spreading the manure and doing things to maintain the field. So whoever owns this, in reference to what Judy said, whoever owns the place now has found people who are upgrading its use as a farm. So that was not happening during, it was kind of a holding action out in the hayfields when no one was there. But, that's the nicest thing I can say about it.
Thank you, Miriam.
Thank you. Okay, so we're through, are we through row
Yep,
two?
we're done with row two.
Okay, row 3, extreme left. You're up. All right.
Hi,
Hello.
my name's Kara Lee, and I live at 135 Huguenot. And I know you can't answer any questions, but the question I had was, I always believed that the ZBA was kind of the final arbiter, and that the ZBA had decided that home occupancy was a good way to go. So I'm still puzzled by it being reversed by the code officer. But that being said, and I did say this in my letter, so I'm repeating it partly for the purposes of my neighbors, that last year we were concerned about a variance because they were talking about a variance for a school. And people felt that they didn't know really what that would mean in the future. But I think that's true with a variance in general, because of course a variance becomes part of the deed and is forever. So choosing a strategy which limits this use to this occupant seemed to everybody to be a comfortable and workable solution, so that we weren't then faced in the future with someone else using a variance in a way that was unpredictable. So I hope that the Board of Appeals and the new code officer will take that tack again.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
Anyone else in the third row?
We're planning to come up at the end.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah, so no one else in the third row wants to come up for the public hearing? Okay, fourth row? Yep, come on.
My name's Matt Bird. I live at 136 North Chestnut Street, not an immediate neighbor. I often borrow the peace and quiet of Huguenot Street from my Huguenot Street neighbors and walk there and have, would not know there was an herb school there, except that Amber was on her porch with her family and greeted my wife and knew her. And it was very jolly, and it was very much like meeting a neighbor in a home. So the home part of home occupation seems to me to be well answered. Obviously, real question is this kind of occupation legitimate for a home occupation? In my own mind, I think that it seems like this is necessarily always somewhat a judgment call. The quick emergency reading of the code said to me that, oh, there's room for interpretation here, always will be. But a reasonable person could say, my ex-wife's kindergarten in her home, being as it's occupied by 15 children from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. every weekday, would not fit a home occupation. Arborvitae can be 100% a school and 100% a home. The question is that home, is the occupation part impinging on the quality of life that a home usually has as a penumbra around it? Wendy's school would be, hey, luckily it's in a zone that allows a school. My brother, who is a tax accountant, works from home and has for 40 years. There's a lot of people coming to visit him, but it's just like one or two visitors. It's like he's a very social person. One or two visitors come in, they leave some papers, they have a discussion, they leave, or they drop off materials. Seems to me that the level of use really is an open question, and is the open question for you, and has been clearly answered. I don't know how binding it is, but if you're able to bind, or you just trust Arborvitae that they're not gonna go from 8 weekends a year to 96 weekends a year, I can't remember 96, 51. Then I think you're just in good shape going with the original decision. And I think that the most concerning thing, as Margaret said, that I've heard today is that the decision was reversed, and it wasn't reversed because there was some other initiating legal action. It was just reversed because the CEO was, I guess, looking over his predecessor's decisions. That's a terrible way to govern anything. And so I hope that it's just a one-off mistake by the new code enforcement officer, which you guys will rectify. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there.
Hello.
My name is Maggie Bevitt, and I actually live on Willie Road, which is up by Duzine Elementary School. And it happens that there, the former judge used to have his home occupation because he's a lawyer. So he reminded me of what I was going to say anyway, that I've been to visit the neighbors who happen to be right across from them, who have done speeches, and live on Springtown Road. And they have always told me how it's great that the school is here. But you don't need to hear how great the school is. What you need to hear is, for me, I remember when Jonathan Katz had his business, and every 5 days of the week, he had 4, 5, 6 people, 7 people coming in and out. And that traffic flow didn't really affect me terribly, except when I turned, I was always very cautious that, because I live on Willie Road in Sunset Ridge. There's a corner there, and he was on the corner, and I should be thinking about, I have to be a little careful about that traffic, but that's what I thought about. I thought about, well, I'll be a little careful. It's probably always good to be a little careful anyway. So I started thinking about the amount of traffic flow that he had, and how it impacted our little community. Is not nearly as much as they would be impacting that community. So, from that simple perspective, I would think that it would be a relatively easy idea to think about, what is the traffic impact? What is the parking impact? And overall, it seemed to be mitigated by just the limited use it has. And clearly, the neighbors want it. And it seems to me it's an easy decision because it seems like it's a mistake that a change was made. I may be mistaken, but it would seem like that was a mistake. And that's all I would say. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi there,
Hello.
Hello.
I'm Michelle. And you need to know how great the neighbors are.
Yeah.
Okay, I just said it once. I'm gonna ask that you please return to Mr. Workman's ruling that there must have been some mistake or oversight or undersight. As the next door neighbor, I'm the closest one, like I'm right there. I see them right out of my door. Their dog comes to my house, my dog goes to their house. We rescue each other's dogs, you know. As the next door neighbor of Arbor Vitae and Amber Merkins, I would like to voice my strong support in favor of their continued presence. Amber lives there full-time and is a wonderful, I shouldn't say it again, neighbor. The school is also a wonderful asset to the community. Speaking only to the home occupation use of this space, I can totally corroborate that the school is only in use a handful of weekends out of the year. Even if it was in use 91 weekends a year, I didn't even know. I don't even know when it's in use. There used to be many more cars. They figured out a way, and people park in public access. So I don't even see anybody. I mean, and people are saying 5 cars. When I saw the last time I went over there when they were in session, there were like 3 cars there. And at my house, there's like, you know, sometimes 10 cars, 15 cars. Don't complain about that. Okay. Okay. People use public parking, what I said, it makes it unnoticeable. I can only tell that it is used by my dog, who consistently retrieves the students' shoes, bringing them to me. And then the other day, I didn't know anybody was there, and I came with my dog, and he ran in and he stole some shoes and a blanket. And there were like 20 people in there, and I didn't even know. So I want you to know that impact that is like beyond minimal. And, you know, just it's beautiful. It's beautiful having there. And I know you don't need to know any more about the herbs, but I was really sick. And thanks to Amber, she helped me with a number of herbs, and I felt much better, and a lot of my friends too. So it's just really incredible. And you do need to hear about this, is that they give free consults, and that's like something that would be worth like $300. So they're more than an asset to the community. They're like almost like doctors, not that they're doctors, but you know, but they're really, you know how herbs, I bet you all use herbs. So, okay, thank you very much.
Last one.
I'm going to take all night. My name is Nils Kulisade. I live at 190 Huguenot Street. So I look at the White House every day, and I love the way it looks. And I'm in total support of them, their occupancy there, and like they've all said, since the last time, in the very beginning, there were a lot of cars, but that's changed. Yeah, I mean, now it's lovely. We see a parade of people when only in those few weekends walking. And Huguenot Street, I tell you, it's harder to drive on Huguenot Street than to walk. You have, you almost know you shouldn't drive it. And really just to say that we've been there since 2010. And it's a lot nicer to have someone in the house than to have it sitting empty, and it's sat empty for a long time. And yeah, it's just a pleasure to kind of know, and there's no, yeah, I wouldn't know they're there. Well, I'm probably louder than my kids and me and my wife, we're probably louder than they are most of the time. And we have more cars in our lot than they do. So yeah, so I'm in total support of their occupancy and what they're doing. And
Thank you.
thank you.
Do we have anybody on the phone, Autumn?
There is one person on the Zoom, maybe until the-
Okay, all right.
Does she
And
want to say anything?
did you want to say something?
What's up?
No, she wants to speak. Go on.
Hi, my name is Chase Spooner. I'm just a student at SUNY New Paltz, so truthfully, I don't even live in New Paltz, so I don't know anything about the neighborhood. All I know is what I can garner from these meetings that I've been through, and maybe that helps add an objective view on the fact that it was a second like deliberation that caused them to like rescind the fact that they are a home occupation. I feel like if you're weighing the worth of each deliberation and which one is more like real, I feel like the fact that they have been working as a business and they have proof and the neighbors have said very strongly that there haven't been like too much of a like nuisance in the neighborhood. I remember in the first meeting that I came, the second building inspector said that the reason that they one of the technicalities that they weren't allowed to be a home occupation was because they had an issue with parking. But it seems from all of the different people saying that they don't have an issue with parking when they're working like at their maximum volume. So I would use that as like evidence that would say that Mr. Worthman, who apparently is a very respected and like esteemed building inspector, I would say that that makes it more of a valuable deliberation rather than Mr. Salinitri's. But I truthfully have never been to the place and I don't live here. So I don't know if my 2 cents actually has any worth. But it just seems strange that they would have a second deliberation when there wasn't any altering or changing. It seems like a very irksome way to like take, I don't know, it just seems like, what if someone else was moved into this and re-deliberated and said it was okay? It seems like an inefficient way to deal with businesses and the people that are living there. It's very wishy-washy. That's all I had to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, everyone else good? We're all good?
Do you want to ask questions or someone?
Yeah, we have.
Oh, yeah. Oh, sure. Why not? There's only one. Why not? Okay, hi, the person online, would you like to speak? Nadine? Nope. Okay. All right, so I move to close.
Letters, particularly from the governing of the easement of Walker Valley.
Okay, this, you can speak in the public hearing. In about 2 minutes, you're gonna have as much time to talk as you want, but this is the public hearing, so.
To read all.
Yeah, we read them all. We've read all the letters. We've.
They're all in the record.
They're all on the record. They're all there. We've read every single one of them. Every single one of them has been read. Okay, we've gone through them all. We've read every single one. Okay, we are completely aware of everything. Okay, we're very aware. I don't want to spend 2 hours reading to you.
6x9
Okay.
colored photos.
Yeah, we got everything.
With
Okay.
this, yeah.
I think there was a specific letter sheet that read aloud into the record. That was the only.
Okay, if you want, you can do that when you come up and read it into thing. Okay, so I move for the public hearing to be closed.
I just want to make sure we've heard everything and we should hear as the public hearing part of this.
They're gonna come up and talk.
Okay, so you will have a chance to join us after this for the discussion part. Is that okay?
All right.
Okay, good. So
Okay.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
Okay, the public hearing is now closed. Okay, so now you guys can come up and talk as much as you want.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm Jonathan DeJoy, the attorney for the applicant. Tonight, we wanted to just take the opportunity to focus on the positive that arborvitae brings. I don't think I can sum up the positive any better than what you've just heard from neighbors. I think it says a lot that we had a public hearing, notices went out, and every single person that showed up is in support of this. And we're not talking about students or employees, we're talking about neighbors, next door neighbors. Everybody knows Arborvitae. They have seen what goes on the property and they're in full support. So and beyond that, I don't think I can make it any clearer that Arborvitae is a positive. It has no impact on the neighbors. We're talking about 8 weekends per year. If we were talking about 6 days a week, that might be a different story, but the use here is so infrequent that almost any other home occupation, commercial use that's permitted would be more intense than what Arborvitae is proposing.
Did you, I'm sorry, before you proceed, you will identify yourselves?
Well, he did.
Yeah, would you like the other people to say who they are? Yes.
Sure. Diana Isidoro, co-director of Arborvitae.
Claudia Keel, co-director of Arborvitae.
Amber Merkins, I live at the property and I direct the student clinic for Arborvitae.
But you guys don't live at Arborvitae.
No.
I live
You do.
there,
Okay.
yeah, and I am an employee of the school.
Okay.
And I run the clinic portion of the program. It's a 3-year program.
Are you both the owners and directors, or are you employees of the school?
We are owners and directors.
Partners.
Okay,
Partners.
okay, good. Thank you.
We're not, we're just partners.
Yes.
We're not a
But you
corporation.
own this, you own
Yes.
Arborvitae.
Mhm.
Okay.
So just to give you guys an example of some of the other commercial uses that are permitted in the historic district, commercial farming, libraries, art galleries, theaters, performing arts centers, golf courses, country clubs, private schools, bed and breakfasts, and commercial parking lots. Now, I think we can agree that any of those is going to have more traffic, more noise, more lighting, negative impacts on the aesthetics, far more so than an herbal school that's not proposing any construction, that's only operating 8 weekends a year. Now, as to the second prong of our argument, I just want to be very clear that Arborvitae doesn't want to have to defend itself. They're not looking for a fight. They're certainly not pointing a finger at the members of the ZBA, but we would be remiss to mention the 2 interpretations and how we got here, because if it hadn't been for the second interpretation, we wouldn't be here before you at all tonight. In other words, if Mr. Worthman's interpretation was left alone, we went to the planning board as instructed, and Mr. Salinitri hadn't issued his determination in January, we wouldn't be here at all. So I know I submitted a long letter with a lot of case law. I don't want you to think I'm bombarding you with a bunch of legalese, but we have to mention it because it's all relevant and all part of the decision that you're going to make. Thank you.
Okay. Do you guys have anything else to add? Okay, all right.
Was there a letter that you wanted to read into the record?
Yeah.
We thought that the recognition from the Wallkill Valley Land Trust was a very important letter. Because they interpret the use, and we had first contacted them when we went to the property and we saw it fulfilling the agricultural use. And so they wrote a letter about the easement as well as all of that and their interpretation. And the village board of trustees has recognized their legal entity as well as Senator Hinchy's office interpreting.
Sure, I'll read it.
Oh, good, you have it. Okay.
Yeah, I do.
I was gonna leave. All right.
Thank you. Yeah, you're welcome. So this letter is from Christy DeBauer, Executive Director of the Wallkill Valley Land Trust. This was dated March 8th, 2024. Dear members of the Village Planning Board, I am writing on behalf of the Wallkill Valley Land Trust, who stewards the 2007 conservation easement on the town and village property at 181 Huguenot Street, New Paltz, New York, 12561. I have reviewed the Village of New Paltz site plan review application and form, which were mailed to me on September 14th by Autumn Sidlun for 181 Huguenot Street, and I provided a letter on September 18th, 2023 that quotes the application. The request is to change the use of the residential home from, quote, residential to, quote, residential with home occupation, end quote. to allow for the operation of an herbalism school. No construction is proposed. Section 4.03 use in the conservation easement states, quote, "Grantors shall have the right to use the property for single-family residential purposes, non-commercial and non-motorized recreational use and agricultural use as defined in Section 301 of the New York State Agricultural and Markets Law. Nothing in this easement shall be interpreted as limiting the right of the grantor to operate a bed and breakfast, other home-based business, or professional offices," end quote. Therefore, changing the use to residential and home-based business is not a violation of the terms of the conservation easement. If you have any questions, please contact me, Best Christy DeBauer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, do you have anything else to add?
I would just like to add, at the last meeting, I know the issue of parking came up, and whether the property could accommodate parking. I would first say that it's not really relevant as to whether the use qualifies as a home occupation, but in any event, it's really more of a planning board issue. The property is 10.5 acres. At the last meeting, Mr. Salanitri said that most of it was located in the town. I confirmed on the zoning map that the entire 10.5 acres is located within the village, and obviously with 10.5 acres, there's more than enough room to accommodate whatever off-street parking the herb school could require. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll be happy to answer any questions the board members might have.
I had, this is the first one we've done of this
Yeah, we haven't-
ever, so
we
we
haven't
haven't done this, so our usual, like, what we're supposed to do next is, yes, so what are we supposed to do right now?
Procedurally,
Yes,
well, we'll have to talk about the issues. If you want to have the opportunity to ask the applicant, the appellant, any questions, we can do with them up here, or that we can dismiss them. As I've looked at this, I see 3 sets of issues, 2 of which are pretty prominent, we discussed today, and the third one was only presented by the appellant in the papers. The issues are whether it was appropriate and legal to have a second determination. The second one is they've alleged a legal issue called special facts, which essentially means that the village boards, agencies, basically, and I don't mean to overstate this, contrived to set up a second determination, which would be negative, basically by the planning board delaying the process for about 5 months. And that's a very legalistic issue, and that's not one that was discussed today, but we can and should talk about it.
Could you just clarify that one more time for me?
Yeah, but they're making 2 procedural allegations, essentially saying that Alex had no right to make the second determination.
Right.
One is that it's just a second determination, and why do it? And we heard a lot of comment on that from a good government perspective. There's also legal issues relating to that I asked the appellant to essentially brief, because if you remember last month, they had mentioned it, but I said, mentioning it's not good enough to preserve it, I want to see it briefed, and they did so, and it was also mentioned, whether he has the right to make a second determination.
Right.
They've also mentioned the fact that the second determination in this case came 5 months afterwards, that the planning board essentially delayed the application process to allow for the second determination. And there are certain issues relating to that, as in, it's essentially an allegation that the village contrived to set up the scenario where they would be denied.
Does it indicate like an intent to do that? Or when you say
Yes,
try to
typically the unstated, I have to go back and look through the cases, but this does come from a sense by the courts that in certain situations, municipalities wanted to contrive to deny things, so they would set up a delay where it would allow for some other procedure. So there is that implication. I'd want to look much more carefully at the allegations here in the cases to see exactly the specific answer to that question, but you can, at this point, assume that that is an element of this particular charge.
Okay.
And frankly, the appellant can say exactly what they're thinking, but I would not dismiss that at this stage. And the third one is the issue, and as I told the board, this is more for you than for me, although I can assist you to the extent that you want, which is whether the decision was ultimately correct. And we're talking really about Alex's decision. This is an appeal from the second decision. He decided this was not a home occupation for certain reasons. They're essentially alleging those were wrong, and there are other reasons why it should be. We heard plenty from the public as to what basically the impact on the public, and that will be, assuming we get past the procedural ones and the jurisdictional ones, that will be the one that essentially functionally amends the code, or it will change the interpretation of the code. As one gentleman suggested, it can do so moving forward, but it will certainly do so here. It will make this a home occupation, and then whatever that implies moving forward is what it is, and that's something the board will think about. Whether this fits within your concept of a home occupation. It becomes that sort of what I'll call substantive question. And so those are the three sets of questions that are before you. The question for you guys is, how do you want to handle them? I can discuss my impressions, but I want to be very sure, I want to be clear that you guys are the ultimate decision maker. So I want you to direct the conversation, and I can assist you as necessary.
So what is so 5 months ago, Corey was in here with the original complaint. Okay. And then they adjourned it, and then dropped it.
Who's the they?
No, we didn't. No, they did.
So that's something else. So
this is
Talk
like
about the variance?
The use.
the use
You go
variance.
back to the beginning of last
I'm
year.
saying like, so the first.
That's where it gets, yeah.
The
hard to-
thing that happened with Corey, we were gonna vote on it, and you guys adjourned it, and then it went away, and then you
The use
pulled
variance.
it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that was,
That's
so
separate.
my confusion here is if, and this is, I'm not a lawyer, I don't pretend to be one, but if you have if you're in, you're in our thing and then you pull it, then to be like, wait, we want it back is sort of strange.
Okay,
No.
That's,
So we don't want the use variance back. That's in the past. That's a separate process.
They're under, this is determining that the use variance isn't necessary. Because if it's a home occupancy, a
It's
use
not,
variance
it's not,
doesn't need to be.
it's not on the table. And-
Yeah.
And I would suggest more broadly this. A lot of, other than the last question I raised, which is a substantive question as to whether Alex made the right decision, let's set that aside for the moment. A lot of the issues before you are procedural. Did the village handle this correctly? And I would suggest to you that it would be worth the board's while to understand exactly procedurally what happened here, because I think to the extent that I think what I heard to some extent tonight and what I read in some of the papers from the appellant's perspective is that they're coming with a particular perspective, and it doesn't give the board the entire range of what actually happened to the extent I understand it, and I'm still on a little bit of a curve here. So it's helpful to understand the process here, particularly if you're judging the process, whether it's this idea of the first and the second decision, and also the special facts issue, because there, but I will start off by saying, Mr. Chair, to the extent of your question, the use variance question started this whole thing, but is now off the table. They've essentially withdrawn it, and
Okay.
it's not before us now. What's before us now is a separate set of ideas and rules that would allow it to move forward alternatively. And we should look at that process as it started essentially when Corey wrote his decision back in July of last year. So that started an alternative process, which we now have to sit in judgment of.
So that's the part I'm unclear of, because whether or not I think that the first call or the second call is accurate right now doesn't really matter, because we're trying to determine whether or not it could have been made or should have been made in the first place. Correct?
Yeah,
So,
yes,
So-
there are two separate things.
Yeah.
One is those
Correct.
procedural issues, and the second, if we determine that the procedural issues were okay, then we can get to Alex's decision.
yeah, so unfortunately, we're like several points away from whether or not we think that it should have been a use variance or not, and that's correct. No, I'm sorry, not use variance, home occupancy, sorry, we're talking, yeah, that was just,
We're not talking about that until the third. That's
yeah, until the
Thursday.
third, so then here's I guess I'm unclear, I was never like cued into what made Corey, what were the events leading up to Corey going and writing something completely different than what we originally were talking about? Because we took this off the table for some reason.
Right, so
What was that reason?
So Arborvitae side of use variance, that was before I was involved. They retained me and I suggested that we go, rather than get a use variance, go to Corey and present to him what Arborvitae is and ask him whether he feels that this is a home occupation.
Okay.
He said, yes, I agree with you. I think it is a home occupation. You can go ahead and go to the planning board to get site plan approval.
And did he write something up? Is that something?
Yeah.
I want to read,
Okay.
I'd like to read it because I think it's really important to understand what Corey did.
Oh, yeah.
And to begin, for two reasons. One, it sets the process in motion. And second, it may color how you've heard some of the savings from both the appellant and also to some extent the public as they look at the two questions. So it's very short and I'd like to read it so we all understand what it is. And this is an informative letter to the appellant. And it's dated July 13th. And I think, before I get started, I think, as the appellant just said, this came as a result of the use variance process, and it's almost standard that a use variance is extremely difficult to get. As you guys know, there may have been some sense of lack of confidence that they were going to come away with the use variance, and so this was suggested as a sort of an alternative. This is what you said, dear Mr. DeJoy, I have received your request for a code interpretation regarding the potential establishment of a home occupation at 181 Huguenot Street. I offer the following comments and interpretation. 1, to establish a home occupation at this residence, the tenant will need to apply to the Village of New Paltz Planning Board, and he cites the code section, to establish the use and subsequently apply for an after-the-fact business change of occupant permit. So he's saying that they need to apply to the planning board to establish the use, and by that he means the home occupation. Then he has a paragraph A. The BCO permit is required for all new businesses to perform a fire safety and property maintenance inspection and issue a CO for the use establishment. Therefore, it is hereby interpreted that Arborvitae and the described operation in your letter submitted June 12th appears to be eligible for home occupation use. Approval of a home occupation can only be granted by the Village of New Paltz Planning Board. So this is essentially telling them that what they presented to him on paper in a June 12th letter, which is also worth reviewing from the appellant, appears to fit within the home occupation and that the planning board would make that determination.
Okay, so that's what we keep referring to as the first decision.
That is correct.
Okay, so then this instructs them to go to the planning board.
That's correct.
So that occurred.
Yes,
That's correct.
we submitted an application. That application, for whatever reason, languished for 5 or 6 months.
Okay.
And we were never actually able to get in front of the planning board.
So for one reason or another.
Not because of anything.
I'm for reasons out of your control. They didn't do this next step upon your request.
They being the planning.
The planning.
Correct.
Yeah.
Have
Okay.
you ever been to the planning board or never?
No.
Because that's
Never been on the
agenda.
Okay. So I'm starting to like understand. I need a timeline.
Right. So so we applied to the planning board. I believe it was July 20-something of 2023, and roughly once a month or so, everybody would check in and say, are we on the, are we going to be on the agenda? They were assured that they were told, not yet, but your application is being processed. And then essentially out of the blue, on January, they got this letter from Mr. Salonitri that said,
so.
Can I ask a
Yeah, absolutely.
What is the standard for being heard by planning boards? Are there rules about how long people have to get a response, to get on agendas?
Well, I've looked into this a little bit, and here's what I understand. And again, there may be more facts coming out. But as the appellant just mentioned, the decision was in July. The application was apparently a week or so later. It's still in July. At that time, my understanding is that Corey left his employment as a building inspector, and the planning board had no building inspector. And one of the things that is necessary for the planning board to move forward with an application is an interpretation by the building inspector. And during this period, my understanding is that the planning board actually suspended a number of applications that were right at the very beginning because they didn't have that interpretation. Applications that already had the interpretation moved forward. During this period, in addition, because they were now applying to the planning board for functionally a site plan approval, they were required to submit more information, more details. And if you look at the original letter they submitted, which was in June, as I mentioned, it was fairly bare bones on the details of the project. And the subsequent submittals through the end of last year had put a lot more meat on the bones of the details, including the things like parking and some of the specifics that would go before the planning board in order to qualify it as a home occupation. And so what the board needs to understand in terms of interpreting what you've heard is that Alex's interpretation arose from two very closely related sets of facts. One is that more information came in during this period, much more information than previously existed when Corey made the determination back in July. And secondly, the planning board needed an interpretation from Alex. In fact, I think they asked for it because they want a CEO interpretation before they go ahead and handle a site plan approval. And that's the process that was suspended during this period. And therefore, to the extent that there's any question as to why Alex made his interpretation, is because one, there was more information on which to make an interpretation, and two, they needed that to move forward with the site plan approval, and that didn't occur until Alex was hired. And I don't know the exact date on that, but as I understand the timeline, that appears to be what happened.
Okay, so yeah, and Alex had stated that he was asked to review it
By the planning board.
by the planning board.
So can I respond to that?
So what is are you guys involved? Like, is anything happened with the planning board? And
Well,
so,
that would be suspended once
Yeah,
the
so-
determination that it's inconsistent with the zoning, the planning board would be suspended and would come here. first.
okay, so we have to come through us first to go back to the planning
Yeah.
board. Gotcha.
So
Okay.
as far as the number two question on the delay, I'm interested in the dates as far as to when we didn't have the gap between Corey and Alex, because that sounds like that was the reason,
That's
or
good-
at least
that's a
a
good point,
possible
But
reason.
I'd like to hear what you wanted to say.
Right, so the first point I want to respond to is that, yes, Arborvitae did submit additional information later on, but we clarified that this additional information did not change anything. It may have explained a few more things in detail, but it did not alter the original proposal that was given to Corey. Now, the planning board is certainly free to go to the building inspector, being Alex, after he was hired and ask him about this, but the interpretation, the determination by Mr. Worthman is what got us to the planning board in the first place. So that was a binding determination where he said this is an occupation.
Yeah. Okay, so one building inspector made a decision. And then, sorry, just so one building inspector made a decision based on information. The second building inspector, who had more information and more time after getting more information, just like we always get, we get more and more information, made, I would say, probably a more accurate decision.
So Corey made the suggestion for them to go to the planning board.
I think it's probably good characterization.
If Corey would not, if we would have not changed inspectors, if Corey would have still been here, once it went to the planning board, would they have also have asked him to look into the same
You know,
facts?
that's one of the facts that I'm moving on, and I need to understand it a little bit better. Legally, I think the answer is yes, and especially given the fact, I mean, even setting aside the fact that you can argue that they wouldn't have needed a second interpretation in order to allow for the project to move forward, but I think the planning board thought they did. The mere fact that there was more information coming in, substantially more information as to the details of the project, and in particular, the one that ultimately Alex relied on, which was the amount of the house that was being used. There were also parking issues that were specified. So I think the answer to that question is yes. I think ultimately, when more information comes in, Not only would it have probably prompted the building inspector, even if it was the same person, to perhaps reconsider the determination, but I also want to point out that we're going to get into the legalistics of this a little bit, but one of the classic justifications for a second decision by an administrative official is new information. I mean, that occurs in every single allowance to reconsider your previous issue. So to the extent that information came in on parking, came in on use of the house and other issues that were deemed important, I think the answer is probably yes.
So it is possible to consider that this doesn't have as much to do with the fact that we switched people in the middle of this. That just complicates things. But
Say that again?
it just complicates things that we switched inspectors in the middle.
I don't think that's the compelling fact here. The reason, I don't think it's the compelling reason behind what the village did, what it did, and I don't think it's the compelling legal issue here. No.
I would respectfully disagree. I believe if Corey had not left, he never would have revisited his interpretation. He was satisfied with the information that we gave him. He didn't ask about how many square feet were being used in the house because the code doesn't have any requirement about square footage.
And the board didn't judge the impressions of this. I point out one other fact.
I'm gonna not agree with that. If Corey got new information, he would utilize it. That he was very thorough. And if he got more information, and in the beginning of this, we definitely did not have all the information. We've gotten more and more information as time's gone. So
Right,
I'm
but-
sure he would have adjusted his opinion based on that. So
Conjecture about what Corey would have done
Yeah,
doesn't
it's
actually
silly.
get us where we need to
yeah,
go.
it's
Right.
it's
But
sort of
the
silly.
point is that the information did not change the fundamental proposal. It clarified some details about it, but nothing changed. It wasn't like what we presented to Corey was, a much less intense use, a smaller use. Like, for example, it's not like we said to Corey, we're going to be using this property once a year. And then we submitted new information that said we were going to be using it once a week. Nothing changed. The applicant presented some new information about, where classes were going to be held and parking, but there was nothing that should have changed the fundamental determination that this is a home occupation. If you go through the factors in the code of what a home occupation is.
I guess where I'm getting held up is that, to me, this reads like a suggestion based on an overview of the steps that need to be taken. And then those steps were taken. And because the inspector changed in the middle, it reads like he overturned his decision. And this doesn't read like a decision to me. This reads like a suggestion of the steps to take. And then when the board would have gotten the information, they would have asked Corey to give his determination at that point in time. I can't read this like a
Yeah,
determination.
I think the building inspector did what they were supposed to do.
So I can see how it reads like a suggestion maybe, but for all intents and purposes, it's not a suggestion, it's a decision, because we couldn't get site plan approval for a home occupation without the building inspector determining that. And we
Procedurally, would there be a second step for the inspector?
Here's what, look, I think it's useful in this context to take a look at the information that was before Corey, which is contained in a June 12th, 2023 letter from the appellant to Corey. It's a 3-pager. I'm not sure if you guys have it before you. But what I think here is what happened was Corey looked at this letter.
It's the second page. No,
It's
that's
dated
Alex.
June 12th, 2023.
I already reviewed it.
No.
Yeah, we have it. Let's see.
Okay. So you guys can make the judgment yourself. I think this is sort of the bookend with Corey's determination. You can see the cause and effect. This is what he was reacting to and looking at. And you can judge for yourself the characterization and the depth of information and then his reaction. I think the way you framed it is pretty accurate. And I would point out one other thing in Corey's determination, which is that he never actually came out and said it's a home occupation. What he said was that that's a decision for the planning board, and he sent it up there. And the conclusion, I want to be very careful about not influencing your decision too much. But I did basically agree with what you were saying, which is that they were evaluating this as information came in. The first one evaluation was this appears to qualify based on what we're seeing and go to the planning board and they will determine it. And the second one is more information has come in and looks like there were some lines that were crossed.
Yeah.
That's the way I'm looking at it.
So to get back to like trying to like bullet point this, the first question was essentially, can there or should there have been a second determination? And my current view of that, based on the information we have here, is that there can, and in my opinion, that was the first determination. That Corey's essentially, I'm saying that I think that Alex's action to look at it, as far as answering number one, whether or not there could be a second call, I think that falls well within his rights, and he was asked upon by the board to do so. By the planning board, yeah. And I'm having a hard time even calling Alex's a second determination, because the way I'm reading this is that's the first determination. The first one was a suggestion of the steps to take. And then when all the facts were in and everything was laid out on the table, it happened to be a change in inspectors, which is what muddles all this. And he then gave us his interpretation, which is Alex's.
I mean, again, I have to respectfully disagree, because building inspectors don't make suggestions, they make determinations. And
it's a suggestion on the steps you should take.
Yeah, but to take that first step, we needed his determination.
Well, and his determination says it appears to be eligible for.
Right.
So his determination was that what they presented appears to be eligible for use.
Right. It's not worded in the most definitive terms possible, but it is nonetheless a binding determination, because if he hadn't given us that, if we didn't go to him, we couldn't just go to the planning board and say we're applying for a home occupation. He gave us the green light to go to the planning board, and the planning board is not tasked with determining whether a particular use is allowable under the code. The site plan review process is really just to say, okay, we think the parking should go here, you should have these kind of lights, the sign should be here, the dumpster should be there. I'm just using examples, but the planning board's job is not to weigh in on whether the use is allowed.
Okay.
That's helpful also.
Well,
Do you disagree with this?
yeah, I do. In fact, if you just look at Corey's determination, if the
they
determination
have
they're
to-
relying on, he's saying the planning board is going to
that's right.
qualify the home occupation.
Yeah, so based in the.
I'm not
document
seeing
work
either
with
building
this.
inspector having done anything wrong. I'm just not seeing anything.
As far as bullet point number 2, which is the delayed on the process, I feel pretty clear on the fact that was a series of trying to get all the information with the change of an inspector in the middle.
I mean,
And that's not our board, so I don't even want to comment on it because it has nothing to do with us. We've been very fast and very on time.
Right, one of these. It's up to you. You can say no, I perfectly understand.
Brief.
Yeah, no,
We can invite somebody.
no. No, we're not gonna turn this, everyone had their opportunity to speak during the public hearing. These are the people that are with us, and we're gonna,
I feel that
all right, talk, you're gonna just talk over me, so you might as well go for it.
information that I think have doing this. You say no, that's fine, I totally respect it, have to get in your position. No.
So, all right, so what's the next procedure for now for us to go through this?
Well, we discussed the two procedural points, really, unless you want to talk more about the special facts issue, which would be looking at that 5-month delay as, what was behind it, et cetera. The third issue, which is maybe the more, what I call substantive, which means it gets down to the real, the nuts and bolts issue, is whether Alex made the right decision and what is the meaning of home occupation in this context. And there's a number of different ways we can work through that. Alex raised a number of things that he found and points that he raised. The appellants raising a number of points themselves. And so we can, and I've told you what my filter is for this, but now it's up to you guys to weigh in and see how you want to make the decision as to whether this qualifies as a home occupation.
So I just want to recap. We have concluded that we think both of these determinations are valid and within the scope of what's legal. Is that right?
That's my interpretation.
That's my remaining too.
I agree with that.
We can wait till we get to the end before you ratify that, but for purposes of moving forward now.
I just want to summarize where we are with these 1, 2, 3.
It's gray because of the wording. But I'm so curious.
What is the planning board process?
Yeah, I'm so curious if the planning board would have asked upon Corey if there wasn't a change.
There's room for more facts here on this procedural thing particularly, and there's more research that maybe be done.
That's really, because that would be, so, but I don't, if there wasn't a change in the inspector,
would Corey have looked at this again?
Would Corey have been asked to look at this again?
Right.
And
my understanding is that the planning board consciously delayed this application as it delayed other applications that had not been determined by the CEO in order to get a CEO determination. And more facts came in, and I don't know where the chicken and the egg is there, or whatever. I don't know like exactly the date that Alex was hired and what the delay was on that end. There are more facts that can be learned on that, but that's where we're at on this.
So can I just add that, so Alex says that he reached his determination based on 2 things. One, that Arborvitae was using too large a percentage of the square footage of the home.
Well, now you're jumping into the actual merits of the actual substance.
Well, not really. Where I'm going with this is that Corey never asked about how much of the home was being used, because that's not part of the code. It's just the same as if Alex said, well, I'm deciding that this isn't a home occupation because you said you're going to paint the walls green. I mean, we didn't give Corey that information because it wasn't relevant and because he didn't ask for it.
It's not required in the code.
No.
It's not part of
So
what defines home occupancy.
obviously I can't speak for him, but my personal opinion is he never would have issued something that said this isn't a home occupation because you're using too large a percentage of the home.
See, I'm less worried about what his determination would have been if the planning board asked him to review it with the additional information, and more worried about if he would have been asked.
My personal feeling is that he would not have, because planning boards.
We need to stop talking for Corey.
That's why
I think on both sides here. This is a really weird.
I'm not saying anything about what Corey would have done.
Process.
The issue here is that there is a second opinion on this. And it looks like someone upending someone else because it's 2 different people. But would we have had this same scenario? That's where I came out my head.
Here's where I come from on that question. The planning board appears to have a pretty stable process, and apparently from what I heard, a number of applications were held up. When the planning board gets an application, very often it has a lot of information in it. It's supposed to have information to allow the planning board to do a number of things. When that information comes in, the first thing the planning board does is not to meet on it. They give it to a CEO to determine if they should meet on it. And that's what held up this process with these folks. And I think it's what held up this process with a number of other applicants during that 5-month period. So I think the answer is, setting aside whatever happened before the application, whatever Corey looked at, and in particular the June 12th letter, when the planning board gets something in, a substantial application with, whatever the site plan and everything else, all the information, they give it to the CEO, and the CEO crunches it and puts it into a box for them and decides how to move forward. That's the way I'm interpreting this right now, but again, there may be an ability to find more facts.
I feel like I need to know on precedent of other cases where there has to be something I can go off of where a planning board said, hey, it looks like it fits into this box. And then you should take it to the planning board, right? Where inspector says, take it to the planning board. And then what happened? That's,
So-
that's what.
In
and
this
like-
case, you don't know, and we have somebody who was the village planning board chair, does it make sense for him to share his?
He's past member, not current.
Well, you can reopen the public hearing if you feel there's valuable information to be heard.
No, he was saying not that he's past his time to speak.
We don't have a current person here.
I think that question I feel like that's a big factor for me on 1 and 2.
Yeah, and
Is-
probably more relevant of what has been, what is done currently on the current planning board versus what was done with.
I just can't help but feel, and like I said, I need more information on this because I don't have these facts, but I can't help but feel that if Alex would have been here or Corey, whoever, doesn't matter, the inspector would have been asked, and his suggestion was, it appears that it fits the criteria to take it to the planning board, that I would then receive a letter from him saying, upon review of the information, this is my determination. Like that, like I need to look
Right,
into it and find out.
It does, I agree with you that it seems to me that a code interpretation is not necessarily the same thing as a determination.
No, it is. It absolutely is. It's really no different. I mean, it's a little bit different, but it's along the same lines as if you had granted a use variance back in June. Arborvitae was told to apply for site plan approval, and then 6 months down the road, the building inspector said, nope, this isn't home occupation. It's not quite the same because a variance is more binding, but an interpretation absolutely is a binding decision.
I guess I just can't.
It is
I-
It just
absolutely
seems like
not
this
the
is
normal
not-
process.
Yeah, but
For
I
this-
feel like we're kind of on the same page as that, where it's like saying that is Corey's stone
Definitive answer, right?
interpretation. It's really,
One way to work, I've been struggling with this too. to be
I mean,
honest
think
with
of
you.
how many times we've changed. Think of the first time we heard this till now, every single time we have a thing, there's more information and
Yeah.
it gets being fleshed out. So.
and I've gone back and
Yeah,
forth
and
with more
and
information.
then,
and less
and the other issue is, even if it was a home occupancy, I'm seeing a whole bunch of problems either way you want to run it. Like, I'm not, like, if we go to the old Corey or the new building inspector, either way, I'm like, looking at this is not, I'm not seeing it. I'm
you're-
seeing a lot of issues.
You're speaking,
Well, do you want to get into the substantive
yeah,
aspect then? Is that what
I'm
you-
really not looking forward.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things we now know. We now know that it's a business. We now know that they have way more than 2 employees. Like,
Not at the property, they
No.
don't.
Not at the property at a
okay,
time.
but you're allowed to have 2 total employees.
At the property.
But they don't have.
Yes, but you're gonna be running through it more than one. You're not gonna have the same 2 people talking all the time.
Is it-
You're gonna
But
have
the
other
code doesn't
people.
say that it has to be the same two.
Yeah, it
people.
does. It says total 2 employees.
Right, total 2 employees at the property. The Village of New Paltz can't say who we can and can't hire.
Employees, no more than 2 non-residential employees may be employed in addition to the owner and the tenant of the property. That means 2 humans. So you get 2 humans.
At the property.
Yes, but
Right.
that's all you get is 2, and you have more than that.
We have
They have the
the,
students.
the resident and 2 employees or
Yes,
2
but
other.
they're not the only persons that are teaching. There's gonna be other people teaching.
There's not gonna be more than 2 people
They're
teaching.
not, yeah,
2
because
different.
they're also not
So
employees.
you're saying if
they're-
you had a different employee if you had 2 employees in there every single day, but they were 2 different people, then you would only have 2 employees. So if you had 700 employees, but they only came in for 2 days at a time, that would be that way. That seems ridiculous.
Like, obviously not in this, but to determine 2 employees, like if I have 2 people on 8-hour shifts rotation. I have 6 employees.
Well, but that's not what we have here.
But you do have people coming in. It's not that tight of a schedule, but you have different people coming in,
Okay, 2
correct?
people per day.
So different.
And
Yeah,
just
but-
legally, there's a difference between an employee and if somebody comes in, like, let's say an accountant had a secretary or a few other people come in to help them. They're not employed, maybe secretary is not the right thing, but some other kind of worker that works for a day to do something. It's a very different kind of thing. It's not an employee of the school. We don't pay them on salary or anything. So that really needs to be very clear to you all, that this is not a big organization with
It
a
is a
lot of
big
employees.
organization. That's-
You two
How many
would-
employees do you have?
We have, it's Amber, and actually we're the partners.
How many other people do you have working for you? So you're saying you only have, so when you have 1099s, how many 1099s do you have? Or whatever those people are called?
We have a number of 1099s.
Okay, how many?
I don't think that's relevant here. The code is not.
It's very
It's
relevant.
not relevant. The code is not concerned with how many employees work in some other town or some other village that's not New Paltz. The intent of the code is so you don't have 20 teachers in the house at
But
one
do they
time.
come, do other teachers come?
Yeah, how many 1099
They only
contractors
come
would you have?
periodically. They don't come every time.
Yeah.
There's 2 people at a time. I want to respectfully say that this was outlined in the letter that our lawyer sent to Corey, and I also had conversations. He was very aware of our setup, and he ruled on this. And when Alex made a different ruling, it was not based on what you're bringing up now, but only about his interpretation of our parking and the use. And what I gave in was only about the rooms that we actually use and not the whole house. And he never visited the house or talked to us about any of it. So I respectfully think that he was not aware of the whole situation. He just read things in an isolated way and not aware of how we actually, how it actually operates. at all.
So just so I can back up 1 second. So you guys are not going to tell me how many employees you have? That's what you're telling me? Because I asked a question and you said you're not gonna
They
answer
said
that.
they have 1 employee.
We employee.
Okay, I'm looking at the
and-
pictures you sent me and I can see 2 employees.
It's-
So so that's 1, 2, and I only see 3. So you're asking me not to use my eyes and you're not answering the
We
question.
also met all of these people.
Yeah.
No,
Like-
so they're per diem teachers that
Okay,
come when they
how
teach.
many per diem teachers do you have on the payroll?
They're not on a payroll. I really want to emphasize that there's a legal distinction in that federally when we write this. So it's not a payroll, it's not an employee, they're not salaried. They only come when they teach. So that's a really important thing to
Oh,
understand.
okay, so I understand that. How many are there?
I have to actually don't know the number.
Within 10.
The code is not concerned with that information.
I'm not hiding it. It's on our website of many people.
I
but-
personally,
If you have 1 employee today and they quit tomorrow, and then you have another one come the next day, are you now prevented from hiring a new person because you had a different employee before? Of course not.
I personally just want to say real quick that I don't even think that I feel comfortable speaking on what I've marked as the 3rd bullet point, which is whether the call was correct or not, without, like, I personally need to figure out my stance on the first 2, which are the legality of it, because whether or not we all gracefully accept that is really going to be determined by the 3rd one. And
Finding for the appellant on any of these points would essentially grant the appeal. That's right. So you could attack it any way you want.
Any of these are,
If they win on any of these, they're gonna win the appeal.
right.
So
So it's worth us talking through each of them.
So you can-
Because you don't have to. be
whichever way you want to
comfortable with
approach
one
it.
answer.
Yeah.
You have to be comfortable with 1 of 3.
Okay.
If you find, it's important to keep in mind too, if you find on the 3rd point that it is a home occupation, then you don't have to pass on whether Alex was right or Corey was right.
Well, they find it's a home occupation.
Yeah.
No,
That's
if his points, if Alex's points on the parking and the,
Whether he was right to go back. or
yeah,
not.
he gave 2 points, and if that stands,
Whether he acted improperly is what I should say.
With the parking and the square footage.
Right. Which we have discussed at length is not relevant to the determination of use.
What'd you say was not relevant?
The parking and the square footage.
He did what he was asked
Well,
to
you
do.
know,
but-
As far as, and that's why I'm getting held
Yeah.
up is
So I
because
think he did the right thing.
one and two
to
seem,
his-
Yeah.
And so then the question is his interpretation correct or not correct, right? Like that is
Yeah.
our.
And I think it is correct.
You know, I just want to throw in one point here. Again, I want to be really careful about not weighing too heavily on the substantive issue, but the applicant has been saying over, basically multiple times tonight that the supplemental information that was sent during the second half of last year was essentially irrelevant, or it doesn't change anything. They've said it a number of times, including a minute ago. I want to read the last criterion for a home occupation, and I'm specifically thinking about parking here. It says, there shall be no external evidence of such home occupation use except for one sign not to exceed 2 square feet in face area. And this gets back to what I was saying before, which is that it's something that occurs within, within the 4 walls of the thing, and people don't really see it. Which is also what it says in another section, that it occurs inside the building. And so I just want to the extent parking is an issue and on-site parking, it becomes an issue, not because there's not enough parking area, which is what the appellant had mentioned in the original presentation, but whether that becomes a visual manifestation of the use that may be changing. And I'm not going to judge this for you, but I'm just laying out the issue, whether that tends to change the ambiance of the identity or anything else, or create nuisances. And so if the CEO were to determine that parking is important for that, it becomes relevant, right? And whether he made the right decision for the number is going to be up to you. But I want to push back on the idea that this information was not relevant to the determination in how the CEO may have interpreted it based on the code, whether it's a home occupation. There's clearly an intent in the code to limit the visual identity of the home occupation. We heard people, and I talked about being a lawyer, being an accountant, where obviously the visual evidence is very, very minimal, other than the sign that they talk about, and maybe 1 or 2 people driving up every so often. That's for this board to decide, but I don't think that information that came in was irrelevant. And Alex didn't think so, and that I see why he thought so. That'll ultimately be your decision as well, but I just want to qualify the appellant's comments.
And I think to clarify my point, what Alex said was that we didn't have the required number of off-street parking spaces, which we do. And as to Mr. Gordon's point, I think it's abundantly clear from all the neighbors that the parking is not an issue as far as the ambiance of the neighborhood.
That gets to whether Alex made the right decision given the.
So what is the required number of parking spots for? See, that's where it gets tricky, because if it's a home occupation. What's up? 1 per 50 square feet. Yeah, I read it, 70 pages ago.
It was about 40, I think.
And
I think you found 41.
41 additional established parking spaces.
Right, and obviously with a 10-acre parcel, there's room for 41 spaces. Not that we'll necessarily ever use anywhere near that many.
There's a distinction between whether, this is typically before a planning board, whether the site has enough parking to allow for the use, and whether, in this case, maybe whether that parking is going to be a visual evidence of the occupation.
So if we agree with Corey and say he did everything, not Corey. If we agree with Alex and say everything he did was correct and proper, then they can go take.
Improper?
No, and proper.
Okay.
Then they can take their, they can then take and go to
If
the
you agree with.
the building, Alex. If we agree with the building inspector, then they can go before the planning board and apply to get.
Just the opposite. The building inspector, the reason why they're here is the building inspector's determination cuts them off from the planning board.
Okay.
He finds it's inconsistent with the zoning, it's not a home occupation.
Yes.
As I understand it, there's also, they have potentially an avenue to think about it as an agricultural use, but setting that aside, which is kind of unusual in this situation.
Yeah.
The example that, and I think Jonathan was alluding to, it would be to file an Article 17 against this board in court. That's what he was alluding to with some of his oblique language earlier. That would be their step if they wanted to move forward with the home occupation. Or there's a number of other things. They could ask the village board to rezone, or they could think about a different avenue. The use variances, they probably aren't going to do it. It's probably not going to work out. But there was the issue of the farm use, which actually people spoke to, was whether this was an adjunct to a farm use, which is entirely separate from a home occupation. It'd be a separate avenue for them to get to the planning board.
Yeah, that was touched on. Thank you.
That's Alex's.
So this determined, they're complaining that Alex's determination cut them off from that access to the
Right.
planning board for some.
And
And it absolutely did, and that's why we.
Well, yeah, and I don't think that that's up for debate. It did.
Right, and that goes back to my point,
Whether or
of
not it
why
should have.
Corey's determination was binding, because the building inspector is the one who decides whether we can go to the planning board.
Right.
And it is not the normal process for there to be two contradictory decisions.
Okay, so that kind of makes me think another. So we go and say that Alex is wrong.
For making the decision, or his decision is wrong.
His decision is wrong.
Regardless.
Okay.
They would then get to go, yeah, then they would get to go to the planning board.
Correct.
And then,
Grass or whatever.
so we're not, we don't necessarily have to make the decision on whether or not this is a home occupation.
No, you do.
Well, you have to make a decision whether it
Not
Alex
if-
has determined that given the information that was before him, it didn't qualify. So, and you'd be making, not only would you be saying that it qualified, but you'd be specifically, essentially, if you did it on the merits, on the substance, you'd be saying that Alex's criteria were incorrect. When he looked at parking, for example, in the 40 spaces, that was incorrect for a home occupation. Home occupation should not look at whether there's 40 spaces. Additionally, he also looked, and this was the appellant commented on this as well at length. Alex looked at the percentage of the house that was being used for the home occupation, and he said more than 50%, that disqualifies it. So those are really, if you want to boil it down, those are the two substantive determinations that he made to disqualify it. And if you ruled that he was wrong, you'd essentially be telling for this, but also for others, that this level of parking does not matter for a home occupation. This level of occupation of the
This
house
is where we get into the.
doesn't matter. And that is really the substantive question before this board. That's what, setting aside the procedural ones, which we're going to find out more about, and I don't know where the board's going to come down, but if you do move to the substantive ones, that's going to be your decision is going to change the nature of a home occupation, or modify it so that the understanding of it is perhaps different than going in. It's certainly different than Alex understood it.
Yeah. And to be clear, no matter if you decide that this is a home occupation, we still have to go before the planning board and get approval from them. And they're going to weigh in on important things like parking, lighting,
And then they're
hours.
gonna send you back.
No, they can't. They can't send us back there.
If you were to determine, for example, on the substance, that, for example, 40 parking spaces is consistent with a home occupation, you're essentially making a zoning determination. The planning board does not have authority to make zoning determinations, which is why they need the CEO to do it. So if it comes before, they're not going to be able to deny site plan approval because it's got 40 parking spaces. If you were to say to Alex, no, that was a wrong thing to do, 40 is okay for a home occupation, the planning board will not have the authority to overturn that. And the same with the home occupancy. If Alex says more than 50% means it's not a home occupation, and we were to say no, the planning board is not going to be able to deny it on that basis. You'll be making essentially that zoning determination, and the planning board will be bound by it. They may have other issues before the board, but it won't be those two. So this becomes an important interpretation of the zoning code, which will be
Right.
binding on the planning board, at least in this case, and
I'm-
presumably in others.
I want to say that I don't find the square footage argument that Alex presented to be credible. And I do that because this is a temporary use of this space 8 weekends per year. And so that means to actually calculate the proper amount of square footage we're using in a calendar year for this space, the math is really different.
Let me frame that for you a little bit. It's a
Yeah.
very important issue and certainly one that the appellate has leaned on a lot. Most home occupations typically are not 8 weeks out. It's usually pretty consistent. If you're a lawyer or an accountant, you're there. And that's, in fact, most zoning determinations are on that basis too, but every so often you do get a zoning determination that's where the impact is argued to be mitigated by, we're only doing this a few weeks out of the year. You see it for event types of things, you see it for certain camping types of things, especially where it's adjunct to something else. And that's always kind of a wild card. That's also going to be up to you to determine what, this is one of their main arguments, whereas if they were doing this, 91 weeks out of the year, as was suggested earlier, it may be a different sort of a thing. I'm not sure how Alex processed that, whether it's not apparent from his decision that he processed it at all.
Right.
But that's up for you. That's kind of, again, it's kind of a wild card in terms of zoning, because zoning doesn't typically, you can have 5 houses on a particular parcel of land. Would it be 10 houses if they were only there for half of the year? It's not
not
a
what we
usual
think about
zoning
it.
thing.
Right.
It can be a seeker thing, which we're not doing for this, but I just want to point that out, that that's what they're saying, and that's okay if you decide to go there, but it's a little bit different. And that would be itself an important addition to how we analyze the zoning code.
Right.
But that's the point, is that it's not much of an impact, because even if we have 40 cars, we don't see a lot of them, and they're only here for a couple of weekends. If it were 40 weekends a year, you might have a different impression. And that's also, if you made that decision on that basis, that would be an important message to the village as well. That's why, that's for you guys to do and not for me. I'm just laying it out for you.
And to be clear in the parking, Arborvitae does not have 40 cars coming, I think, as you've heard from the neighbors, so.
We understand that.
Whatever the number is,
Right.
though,
Because it's really
you're clearly
basic,
making a strong argument, you're relying strongly on the limited time frame of the use.
And the planning board can rule about how we use the parking if they so choose.
And I haven't gotten into the weeds of the code provisions, because we haven't got to the planning board yet, but they can in all likelihood waive the number of parking spots that Arborvitae would need.
I'm just saying that, what you're saying though is a very important aspect here. It's not clear that Alex took it fully into account.
Right.
It's not clear, and he may be interpreting his understanding of zoning. It's usually not an issue in the zoning, because when you build something, it's there for
Usually permanent.
52 weeks out of the year, but there are certain event types of things
Right.
where it does come into play, and that certainly comes back here, and certainly they're relying on it.
And an overarching principle is that when there are ambiguities in a zoning code, the law says that they have to be resolved in favor of the property owner. That goes with any ambiguity within the zoning code.
Struggling. I mean, the appellant's making certain arguments, and I don't want to weigh in too much, and we can go back and forth. You guys are better understanding the structure of the issues now, and the way Alex approached it, to the extent we get to the substance, and also the procedures as well. So you can take this whichever way you want to go. You should control the argument. And the appellant you can ask questions of them and get information, but you guys should just control the argument.
Can I ask a
Control the,
procedural
analysis.
question? This might not come in factor, but just, I'm kind of curious, because this all might not really matter, is what's the end of this? This is a different procedure than we normally do without secra and everything like that.
Well, it's an appeal procedure.
So what's the end of this? Say we all have firm opinions on this right now.
You uphold Alex's
We're voting?
determination. So, or something in the middle.
And does it need to be, there's only 3 of us?
Well, you'll need a unanimous.
And
vote.
okay, that's basically what I was getting to.
We need a unanimous vote.
You need,
Unanimous.
your full board is 5, right?
Yeah.
We need a unanimous vote.
Because we're,
Yeah.
You need you're gonna need to agree on it until and unless you get a 4th person.
Is the board currently only 3 members?
There's a 4th person who is not here for this year.
But we're allowed quorum of 3,
Right.
so, yeah.
You got a quorum, and you need 3 to, functionally, you got a quorum, you need 3 to vote, so functionally, you need a unanimous vote,
Yeah.
whether or not.
We can't do it. 2 out of 3?
No,
No,
It can't be a majority?
No.
majority of the full board.
you
Okay.
have to have 4 people that do a majority. And this has happened before.
Yeah.
And we have delayed to get a 4th person on there because I personally really dislike when the voting process isn't a vote, because if I can veto everything, that's not a vote.
Well, and that's kind of why
And
I'm
in that-
bringing that up. at
in
this
that-
point.
Yeah, and as you can see, this is a pretty complicated issue. And it might be in your best interest to request an adjournment so that we can get another board member here, so that if one of us has a sticking point, it doesn't affect you.
Yes, I appreciate that, and we would absolutely request that.
And that would give us more time to also do our due diligence and wrap our brains around this one. Because this is a weird one.
It certainly doesn't seem like it should be, but as everyone here knows,
It-
at this point, there's a lot of
There's
things.
a lot of weirdness.
Can we just finish the conversation on these 3 things? So,
Yeah.
so we agreed in principle that it was legal for a second determination.
Yes.
Or first, whatever it is, legal for Alex to weigh in. We think
Yes,
that's legal
yeah,
or credible.
Yes, I think that's
Okay.
legal.
And we didn't really talk about, is there a special facts? Like, did the planning board delay this on purpose in a way? I'm
Well,
still a little foggy on this one.
Well, yeah, that's, the allegation is that the courts in certain circumstances where there's a delay and it looks like it was arranged and ultimately there's a negative result for the applicant, they'll say special. I actually need to do more research on it. It's very rare. It's not typical. Obviously, it imputes some negativity to the municipality. So I understand why they put it in there because really in their mind, it is because of the change of the building inspector. That took a few months and they were waiting before the planning board. They didn't get a lot of information. So I understand why they said it, but I don't know where it's gonna go. We can have more information the next time we meet on this.
we would, yeah, if we had the timeline of the inspectors changing.
The planning board weighing in on
And the
what is the
planning-
process, right? I think this would be helpful.
It would not hurt to have the planning board chair here if he chose to be. It would not hurt to have Alex here if he chose to be and to help us with this. So, yeah,
So
a little
one-
more information would be helpful on both of the procedural issues. And in any event, I think we're probably going to defer that decision until perhaps the next meeting for a bunch of reasons. And so we can get a little more homework done and then we can see where you guys want to go on the substantive issue. I don't want to shut it down, but if you
Well,
want to make a decision, that's what we go.
Well, and
fine.
I'm wondering if I just want to hear from you guys at this point. Where are we standing on this, number 2, the legal issues, but do we think
So,
there is something?
Standing on number 2, currently, I believe that it was not delayed on purpose out of any sort of
there's no
special service.
nefarious thing.
No, I don't think it was
I
nefarious.
feel like if we look at other planning board cases over the same timeline and the gap, the dates of when one inspector started and the other one started, then I would have facts on that. Right now, I'm just going on like my understanding of the timeline. That seems like the reason.
Yeah.
It seems
So-
like it makes sense.
Yeah, well, so, but the question I think is on this special facts thing of if the planning board hadn't held back on this because they had this determination, code interpretation from Corey, like, I think that to me, the pertinent question for number 2 from the planning board current chair is, did you need more information from the building inspector to look at
Regardless
this?
if it was a different.
Right, like why, right,
Yeah.
like, did you need more information from the building inspector to look at this particular case?
I'm also curious, I'm sorry to bring up a completely fresh angle to this, but in cases where inspectors like this hadn't been in front of the board yet, so it wasn't a case
It was not
in front of the,
There's an application in, but I don't believe the planning
Yeah.
board ever met on it.
so what is the precedent for if an inspector leaves and they hire a new inspector? A part of me says that it would only make sense moving forward because he would be the one asked to weigh in on any further questions for him to review the case.
Particularly if new information, expanded information came in.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm curious if yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that could be the reason, but like, I would think that he would want to, like, I'm assuming he reviewed all of them. But
I feel a little bit more, I think the board needs more, maybe perhaps some more guidance from me on the procedural questions on the substantive ones, which is frankly your decision on the one, because these are legalistic. My impression at this point is that despite the characterizations that we've heard, that the village, look, it would be better if the village didn't have a 5-month gap in a building inspector. That's actually, that can cause problems in a lot of different ways, but that is what happened. They got a building inspector. And so I think that there was not the level of inappropriateness that would have obviated Alex's jurisdiction to look at the new information. Tentatively, that's what I would suggest for now in order to move forward with the substantive. And we can circle back, and ultimately it's ultimately your decision. I'll report to you anything that I find. But I think for our purposes, the board's better off looking at the substantive issue, and I'll see what I can do about reporting more information on the procedural one, and then we can make the determination we want.
Okay, sum up for you, Noah. My current stance is that unless I'm wrong about the timeline and the gap and the procedure of that's where I stand on it now.
Where?
With that number 2, that there wasn't a special, that one is, special factor.
I think the timeline makes sense.
Which was not mentioned on this, I've been pulled back, but there is a Court of Appeals case. New York Court of Appeals is New York State's High Court, that basically says that building inspectors are entitled to, in fact, they should, if they become aware that an issue is inconsistent with the zoning code, the building inspector always has the right to enforce the zoning code. And that's a Court of Appeals case from 1988. The appellant didn't mention it in their papers, but I was going to actually, if we got into it, I was going to ask them what their answer to that was. But at this point, in my mind, that's pretty controlling. The building inspector.
He could have looked at it even if he wasn't.
He should have, actually. The way this, and by the way, this decision was a New York City decision where, relying on the building inspector, they constructed a 31-story building in a zone that only allowed a 19-story building. And the second decision was to take down the 12 stories, and the Court of Appeals upheld that. So we're talking about some pretty serious secondary decision here, and that because it was the right decision with the zoning code.
Can I answer that?
Yeah.
The difference. So
the papers, but that was.
So the difference here is that, yes, a building inspector can correct a mistake. So if they say, yes, you can put a gas station on this property, then they go back a month later and say, I made a mistake. I thought your property was in a different zone. You can see that I made a mistake. It's right in the code here. They can correct that. But what they can't do is overturn a well-reasoned decision. So Corey he made his decision. Nobody objected to it while he was building inspector or anytime thereafter until 6 months later. So that a building inspector can't do that. Just like
Since we're arguing back and forth, Corey's decision, there was not a lot of reasoning in it. I read it to you very quickly, and he said that they could go to the planning board. And secondarily, it was clearly new information that came in. However they want to characterize it, so and I also would note that in the submittal, they did not distinguish that very controlling case. And so my sense is, on the procedural level,
we kind of got just say that, and he's not required to say the reasons, but the evidence of a previous letter, which you said you were interested in reading, clearly outlines what we were that he based it on. And also, I can testify to conversations, but that's not here nor there. There is evidence of what he based it on. If you go back to the letter that our lawyer sent him, so that's so that is information.
Right. It wasn't based on nothing.
No. And I don't,
and he knew about us in a lot of other ways as well.
Yeah. Did he ask about the square footage? No, but why would he?
Yeah.
So from a substantive, this, I think, segues back to the third point.
Yeah, let's stick.
So
Let's stick to
substantive,
Let's stick to three.
The question of, is Alex's interpretation correct or incorrect? And he's basing, in my read of his determination letter, he's basing it on the square footage question, which to me seems well, questionable, just given the amount of square footage that exists over the course of a year and the amount of square footage that is actually occupied in this use over the course of the year. And that actually also drives the parking numbers.
I guess I struggle more on the tying the square footage to the amount of time used, just as like one is a construct, like one is a firm number. And I'm not saying that I like agree or disagree at this point. I'm just saying that I can't see the connection between the two that you seem to.
I want you to clarify that point. Are you saying that the time is a mitigating factor or is not a mitigating factor?
Not.
In reference to the square footage, I think it is not.
Okay.
I mean, that seems really strange to me because I live in the house the whole time and we use the entire house, me and my kids, all the time. We move some things around to set it up so that we can hold classes there. And it's not like most of the house is a school. No one's ever visited the house when I'm living there. And I feel like, I don't know, but I feel like you see some pictures of a room set up as a classroom and you assume that all of this space is like used all, you know.
We saw pictures of it set up not as a
Okay.
classroom also.
All right.
Like they're included in there.
So we have this really big house, right? And there's space used for classroom classes to be held during these few days out of the year. And I don't see how you could not take that into consideration, that the time, and I'm still there, my kids are still there, we still have our living spaces and we still use them. And so it's just curious that it wouldn't be taken into consideration how much time we're living there and in comparison to how much space is used for the house, I mean, for the business overall.
Right, if you look at it over the course of a year, it's so small.
6.5%.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like
I guess
5%.
that's- Yeah, that's where I'm.
I have, you know, like I have furniture, like it's
It's your actual
a
house.
home.
No,
Yeah.
no, and I understand and that's not what I'm not questioning that factor.
I don't want to insult Mr. Salonici, but I'm going to be blunt here and say that the square footage requirement is made up. The code does not say that.
Okay, let me comment on this. What Alex was interpreting in the code, in the black letter of the code, is the subordination to the principal use. The accessory use, the home occupation has to be subordinate. So what does subordinate mean? And this happens all the time, that an agency has to interpret the law and apply it to a case. So how do we measure subordinate? How do we measure that? And I would suggest that Alex, and this is what this board is going to sit in judgment of, determine that in this case, subordinate would mean less than 50% of the area. So when the appellant says he just made it up, okay, but it's up to an agency to take the law and interpret and apply it and explain why they're doing so. And sometimes that explanation is going to have criteria that they're applying. And sometimes they do make it up, but the question is that a useful thing? And so what this board really needs to answer is what does subordinate mean in this context? And also I want to add,
Yeah.
this also could be where the timing thing comes in more strongly. That's also on the table as well. That's all before you. Alex chose a path. You guys will get the judgment of that.
I mean, I think if we're talking about subordinate, regardless of what Alex said, I think you've heard from neighbors today that it clearly is subordinate. Nobody, absolutely.
Yes, we heard that. It's interpretation of what you see and hear before you, it's not only like.
Right.
The.
Well, and that's why the the hard numbers, that's why it being tied, I don't like that.
Right.
Because it,
But then getting back to the subordinate concept, if we take out, we don't consider Alex's own words. and
Right.
The percentage of square or the number of
Yeah.
square feet, then. I think that gives us more room on interpreting some
Let me
words.
throw some more words out at you in terms of the code. It's clearly incidental and secondary. So it's got to be clear, subordinate, clearly incidental and secondary. So those are the operative words in the code that Alex was interpreting, that Frank, that you guys are going to.
And like when you read the examples that they give, they're all like an accountant. They're all like one person sitting in, like a dentist, a
That's
lawyer, a
typical.
doctor and all that. other
It's
stuff.
also, they're only doing it eight weekends out of the year, so that's,
Yeah.
that's going to be a very important part of
So
this.
here's-
Subordinate, incidental, secondary is that they're only there for 8
Okay,
weeks.
so what happens what happens if they get this? And then they all of a sudden decide to run classes every day?
Well, that wouldn't be,
that would be up to,
Well,
we
That
couldn't
would-
do
They would
that.
have permission.
well, the
right?
board,
They're gonna be-
they have to go to the
they're gonna
board.
need to put in an application to the planning board that's consistent with the home occupation and whatever this board decides. So if we decide that it's got, obviously it's got to be incidental and secondary, and you're gonna have to, if you were to modify or to reverse Alex's decision, you may say, nah, he was just wrong, it's definitely incidental and secondary, or you may apply your own standards. And whatever you do, that's what they will take to the planning board, and then the planning board will have to figure it out. So
And then if there needs to be amendments in like details and things, that would be up to them, not to us.
you essentially, Alex tended to recraft the zoning law in a way that made sense, given the interpretation of the application here. You're gonna have to do the same thing. He's giving you a head start, but it's gonna be up to you.
I hate
figure
to,
out-
I hate to speak on, essentially. This feels like his interpretation, he read it, he looked over it, he didn't feel that it fit. And then these are the ways that he tried to
Yeah.
define those feelings.
Decision makers,
And
I'd love to tell you that every judge sits there and just applies the law and but the truth is judges have instincts as to what they think is right. In this case, what's incidental and subordinate. And then sometimes they will come up with a rationale later. I'm not going to say that Alex did that or didn't. He's not here to defend himself, but it could be either way. And there's
Yeah.
nothing unusual about in American courts or anywhere else, people
Yeah.
making a decision and then figuring out how the law applies to it.
And if you're worried that you're gonna be writing a blank check and they can suddenly start using it every day and there's 50 people coming and going from the property, that's not what you're doing. You're agreeing that it's a home occupation subject to the information that we've given you, that it's 8 weekends a year. And if, when we go in front of the planning board, they will talk about things like hours of operation.
More parameters in 8 weekends. I think somebody asked what if they, you bring double the number of people. And so it depends on the application, depends on the specifics, depends how
But
you
that's
wait.
not what we're here to-
Ultimately, it depends on the planning.
But
board.
that's not for us to
That's not-
determine.
Yeah, and that's not what we should be doing.
But if it can fit into the parameter, then it would be their job to then fit it into that parameter. It's
It's just our goal. It's
Yeah.
not like we're trying to
yeah.
get the home occupation and then change it into something else, that's,
And
that's
yeah.
also a little bit accusatory. It's like, there's no nefarious
We also have.
intent there, it's like. that's-
We've been trying to go to the planning board
We
since.
had this.
Well, you should have gone to the
model that-
planning board before you rented the place.
existing-
That would have been the appropriate time. If you're gonna, no, let me finish. If you're gonna bring a business into a community, you should go to the planning board the first months beforehand and take care of that. This is very self-created. Okay, you got busted by Corey.
We didn't get
Yes,
busted.
yes, okay.
We did not, there are no violations. We approached Corey.
Did you
I love
approach
Corey.
Corey before you rented the place?
We approached the easement. We talked to the,
You didn't
Christian
talk to the
Brown.
town. That's the critical part that was missed from the very beginning. Before you start a business in a town, you should ask the building inspector and the planning board if you can do it. And we wouldn't be having this conversation if that had happened.
Well, but that is what happened. We went to Corey, whether it was.
You didn't go to Corey before you rented it. You didn't go to Corey before you had your first class. You had classes before Corey found out about this.
That's
So-
neither here nor there. We
No,
went-
that's
It-
like
no,
really
it-
hits to the
You
issue of
s-
this.
You said if we went to Corey, we wouldn't be here, and I agree, and that's why we did go to Corey. Maybe they should have done it a month prior, but that's neither here nor there. As soon as they realized that they needed to go to Corey and needed to get planning board approval, they did, and that's why we went to Corey. And he,
But I think all of that aside, we are on number 3.
We are number
We're
3,
on
yes.
number- We're on
Okay.
number 3.
We are
Is
number
the
3.
substance of Alex's decision valid or invalid? Do we agree with his assessment or not? And in my reading of this letter and listening to the fact that
Which letter?
the letter that Alex wrote,
Right.
dated January
January
2nd, yep, his January 2nd letter. You know, he's basing his conclusions on square footage and.
Square footage and parking
Yeah.
as an interpretation of incidental,
So-
secondary, and subordinate.
Right, yes.
That's right.
And so I think if we're thinking of, is this incidental, subordinate and
It's secondary.
secondary?
And you factor in the
think-
fact that it's not 52 weeks, it's 8 weeks.
Is
Right.
it, can we take out one factor and like, I think everyone agrees that it's secondary.
Right,
Can we just lay that down?
it is
It's
definitely
like, are
secondary. Do you
you,
agree that it's secondary,
okay, all right, so
incidental?
anything that we can take away,
Right, we've already covered it is
That's-
secondary.
and you don't necessarily have to address the Corey versus Alex thing. If you're
Right.
in agreement that it meets the criteria for a home occupation, that can be the end of your analysis.
That's my point.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
I was saying earlier, and I was kind of speaking on behalf of Alex, and I guess I was kind of paraphrasing. There's a part of me that feels like it doesn't, but I'm trying to,
Part of you that feels like what doesn't.
like it, there's a part of me that feels like it doesn't qualify.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to make sure that that's not just I'm trying to make sure that whether I'm right or wrong based on the facts.
What's your instinctive reason?
And that's why I haven't said this yet, is because it really is more, it is just kind of an instinctual thing. Like it just essentially like how, when I read what a home occupancy business is, and then I look at what this is, whether it's visually with pictures or like the size or the fact that we're like playing it, like taking things into consideration, like public parking this far away and that far away, like
Is it because?
that doesn't feel to me like it fits into a home occupancy
Is it
package.
because it's supposed to fit within the principal structure? Is that? a
That's
thing?
another problem.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about that this time because that was and that's where like, I think that that's why he focused on the parking, is because it's the
Most obvious.
mass of people at one time. Regardless of like the percentage of time of a year.
Right.
Like when it's happening, the amount of people that are there doesn't feel like that fits into a home occupation for me. And the thing that's tied in the code to how many people are there is the fact that they get there in cars. And
I hear what you're saying, but you can't just think of it in a vacuum. I mean, the
I'm
neighbors are.
certainly not trying,
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of everything, and I hope that you see that I'm not.
And was what you were saying before, is, do you think that's why he said he came up with the 51% square footage as an outlet for that?
Well, and then, like I said, I certainly hate to, and I mean, and it would just be easier if we
Well,
just
so
straight
I
up
think you
asked.
skip it, you just make your
Yeah.
own decision. What you think is
Right,
subordinate.
whatever he was thinking.
Yeah,
It's like, what do we think this is a home occupation?
I mean, I think it's pretty clear from the people who live next to the property and see it every day that they feel strongly that it is subordinate and it is secondary and it doesn't have an impact on the neighborhood, which is what the code is concerned with. It's not concerned with, details in a vacuum.
And that was the parameter that I laid out for you last month, as to what I thought that was the purpose of home occupation, whether it
Yeah.
changed the character of the area.
So many people spoke on, and we talked about that there aren't cars there because they're parking at lots and walking in and like how
Or
that.
taking the bus in.
Or taking the bus or whatever the case may be, but there's nothing setting that. You're doing that because this was an issue. There used to be more cars there, and then started using public lots because it was tied into this. So
once you have
like
I
that,
think
that like I feel like that was a reaction to this situation.
Impact on community.
And may it be a solution? Yeah, and could this go forward and the board, and the board tie that as like a factor onto it? But like I can't take that into consideration.
Well,
Like
that's not really what we're trying to answer either, right? Like what we're trying to
Yeah.
answer is this a home occupation? And I think getting back to like your gut on this versus like your rational mind on this is kind of where we need to be in our
Yeah, I think-
analysis.
and honestly, I don't know how much it matters right now because I feel like there's a
Well,
person
there's three of us who
there's
have
three of
to
us.
get on the same page about
Yeah.
something, right? And so I'm starting with you because you're talking, but I also want to hear
Yeah.
Sean's opinion on this.
Yeah, this is a big company doing big things with big amounts of people. Like if 70 people or 30 people came into my house, that would be a community party. This is like, this isn't a business that's like, when we look at the businesses here, there are things that like seamstress, dressmaker, physician, dentist, lawyer, architect, licensed professional engineer. These are things that you're gonna get a few people in. The teacher and similar occupations, emphasis added, I'm sure that's meaning like tutoring and doing stuff like
the
music and
piano,
instruments,
yeah.
piano. And so I'm looking at all the examples they gave. They're all people where you're gonna have one person come in, maybe two, and then leave, and then two more people come in and then leave. They're all real, like accountants have three people come in a 4-hour period. So I feel like I understand my understanding of this home occupation thing is a person wants to work from home and they're a realtor, and this is not that. This is a school. This is a legit school with a payroll and tax ways of preventing from having employees. You don't have to have it. This is a business. This is a legit business. This isn't, and it's also very complicated because they don't own, you live there, you own the business, and someone else owns the property. And this is very convoluted.
It is convoluted.
It's very like, and when things are really confusing like this, I just look at what I would call this. So if I saw 60 people staring at a screen and one person in front of it lecturing, I'd be like, that's a school.
Well,
Like that's how I see this. This is a school. I mean, if I have 40 children in front of me and I have a chalkboard and I'm talking.
But
it's-
think about it this way, balance that out with the frequency. Yes, if you had a piano teacher, less people would be there at a time, but you could have 2 other employees and you could have students coming and going 7 days a week. So does that?
And no one would notice that
But they don't notice this either. Because it's only 8 weekends a year. Like you said, you could have a party 8 weekends a year at your house, and that's not going to change the character of the neighborhood. And I think it's important to remember too, that we think of Huguenot Street as a residential area, but the code does allow all these other uses like bed and breakfast, theaters, performing arts centers. So
And schools, I think you actually said schools in that.
yes, and so, yeah, if we had,
Most relevant,
if we were a private high school,
Actually, I think Performing Arts Center might be more relevant because you would be a few people most of the time, and that's interesting to me.
Yeah,
Because
so what's
you-
allowed in that?
Sure,
Well, and then you would have a burst of people for performance, right?
right, so if you look
Like
at
maybe 8 weeks a year.
cultural facilities here in the use table. Cultural facilities are a permitted use, permitted as of right. And one of the businesses that falls under cultural facilities are performing arts centers. So we could potentially have a huge performing arts center with 100 people viewing a performance. And that's permitted as of right. We wouldn't have to be here in front of you to have that. We're asking for.
And then parking would once again become a
My
factor.
name is Arbor Vitae Performing Arts.
We're about to.
Just put a little flair in.
We could have we could have a farm on the property with tractors running all hours of the days, trucks coming and going, packing houses, and that would be much more disruptive to the neighborhood than an herb school that's held indoors 8 weekends a year.
Yeah, I guess
We're still asking, like, is this a home occupation?
That's
Like,
right.
in addition to, like, this is all, I think, very helpful context, like.
Yeah.
Is this a home occupation is the essential question that we're asking,
That's right.
and
Thank you.
I think it's fair to say that, like, a dentist or a, massage therapist business is different from a school business. I think it's fair to say that.
So I think it's fair to say that, and I think, so once again, we keep talking about like the impact, like it's only 8 weeks a year, it's the neighbors aren't affected by it, if anything, positively. But that still doesn't answer that question.
Well, right, and so the
Is it,
question for us is
like,
like, can we get comfortable?
I don't
with
know
the
how much
idea
that matters to me.
Well, I think it,
The question for us is, could we get comfortable with the idea in today's day and age that this, like, what I consider kind of a pop-up version of a school, like a pop-up school for 60 people is a home occupation. And I run an events business, and that's my day job. And so, my sense of events and putting people in places that are unusual or more typical, I come at this from a certain lens of running businesses, running my business largely out of my home, although I don't have events at my home, but having the sense of working in today's world economy infrastructure is just very different from certainly when this was written. And so I think a lot of that gives me the flexibility to say, yeah, this makes total sense to me as a home business. Like I absolutely.
right. The code has a list of examples, but it's not an end all be all.
Yeah, of course.
It's not
Of
a
course.
code. But
And
that's what-
see, here's kind of where I'm at is it feels the way that you're leaning one particular way. I am close enough on the fence to where really I could be argued either direction, and I don't know how much that matters. So I'm turning to you. Wow, unfortunately, because that's am I reading that correctly? That you're feeling like this could fit into this box of home occupation?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, I don't know how many more times we can circle.
Yeah.
That's
That we've heard, Sean, do you feel like you've said all the things you want to say about your I mean, you were sort of going through your thinking on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm. This just looks, this is, our decision goes with the land. So if we say you can put a school in there, so then they can put a school in there. And then if we-
this isn't a use for it. No, this isn't a use.
It doesn't go with,
No.
It's deeper than that. And your decision will be helping to define a
Yes,
home occupation.
Because it could be used
Yeah,
as
and
a factor.
and this is like,
Our decision
I'm just
will be held.
thinking of, like, I'm just thinking of situations where 40 people are going into a place and leaving a place. And I know that for the last year or plus, you guys have been insanely polite to the neighbors and alleviating all the stress. But as soon as this is legal, your incentive to continue to be polite neighbors is gone. And if everyone wants to park wherever they want to, they can do that because we've allowed it, because we can't put politeness and being nice neighbors and politeness into
None of
the
that's
zoning
Wait,
things.
you-
And that's,
None of that's on us.
you can't,
Yeah.
but the planning board can.
the planning board can't.
None of that's on us.
And you can, as the zoning board, write a letter to the planning board stating your findings and why you made your decision, and they can say, you can't have people parking all over the place. That's what the planning board does.
So. Not to. Whether or not it fits in the current box, I lean towards no. But I think that maybe it could. And I don't know, as far as like the concern of it being a precedent, I don't know if I think that I possibly could deal with that. Like, as far as,
The precedent, I want to be clear, the precedent thing is just so you don't think this is a one-off.
Yeah.
The point though is, the job.
like,
for
I
the-
could stand with that
The
decision.
job for the board is to work your way through this so that this is an appropriate use here
Yeah.
within the context, which, as a home occupation. And once you satisfy yourself that this is an appropriate use as a home occupation with whatever, and we can put certain parameters on this. I mean, we do have some ability to do that. And so, and to guide the planning board. And so once we make those parameters and that decision, that will be replicated. But
Yeah.
the point is, if we can do the job here on this site, that's the job we need to do. And then we'll worry about downstream. Remember, if the village board doesn't like what we do, they can go ahead and they can just change the zoning.
So, yeah, and that's where.
The point is to get this part right.
And that's where I'm feeling a little tricky, is because like, as a human, I want this to work.
Yes.
I want you
agree
to
with that.
stay in your home with your children and for you to run a business where all your neighbors love everything that you teach.
So
I feel like I have to make sure that, because that's not what I'm being asked.
No, what you're being asked, is this a home occupation?
Yeah, and that's where I wish I was being asked other questions.
Well, you can put, as part of your decision, you can put reasonable conditions on that decision. You can say that.
So if we were to say you could
Not
have,
on our,
so could we put
because
something
ours
in?
is just whether or not.
Could we say, could we define this situation as being under 216 hours a year? So they could only have class under 216 hours a year.
They've functionally presented that.
Yes.
That's easy.
So if we said, so we could say that this would be okay if the total time used was 216 hours or less per year.
That's easy, because they've put that in this area.
That's interesting.
What I'm struggling with is.
Because I'm really, because it has to be, like, I'm just looking at how this could explode into a
Is
huge
216
issue.
hours
That would be 8 hours times 3 times
I didn't do the math that quick in my head, but if that's what it works out to, then yes,
It's
you
8 times
could,
3 times 9.
you could find that
Nine.
it is a
Yeah.
home occupation if it is under.
Sounds like that's something, right?
Yes.
You got a
Well,
buffer
maybe it's
weekend.
not
Let's.
What?
Oh, the math's still the same because
Yeah,
it's
he's
9
got
hours a
that.
day.
It's 9 hours a day, all right. Are you paying your employees overtime for that hour?
No, yeah, no employee.
But yes, I mean, to answer your question, yes, to whatever the hours works out to, you could say that we find it as a home occupation if it is less than however many hours.
So-
92 hours a year.
So personally,
Real question, yeah, that's right. The real question in my mind is what leeway we have to redefine this in the way that you
Right.
stated. If Corey's overstepped, or I'm sorry, if Alex has overstepped, then what would be the right answer? Or is there just nothing here, or is there an answer in terms of things like parking, in terms of
How could
occupancy?
Alex get it right next time? Is the question you're asking, right?
How do we lay it down? So, yeah, so Alex, the whole
Right.
village will have the guidance from this board.
Yep.
And what I'm worried about is to what extent does that begin to look like you're like the village board doing zoning? But on the
Yeah.
other hand, it could do me a lot of good here by straightening everything out, and
I-
I'm struggling with that.
Right, and as far as the precedent goes, every application is different. If someone who wants to run another school 20 weekends a year on a 3rd-story apartment on Main Street comes to you, that's a different set of facts, and that doesn't mean that you're obligated.
There's no more than five parked cars visible from the road in order, so that we can say it's, nobody's gonna know that you guys are running an occupation inside, which is really what the body language of this
Yeah.
statute says.
So, but we're doing that would be, I feel like that would be doing the zoning.
That's what I'm struggling with, but
And so-
the question is, do I
So
need to do
I
it?
guess where I'm starting to feel more comfortable on is giving my vote with a suggestion, with a letter of
Planning board for.
our thought process.
But they don't have to.
Yeah, and they don't have to do anything. They don't have to do anything.
It will be a written decision, so that will be, we don't have to write a letter, it will be a written decision that will govern this application. It could be upholding.
Yeah, so, but I guess that's what I mean, like, if I, like. Is it fair for me to say that Alex's determination is wrong? Because there will only be 3 cars visible?
You know what, that's what I'm struggling with, but there's worse
That's
sins.
kind of what's happening.
There's worse sins to commit than that. I mean, if somebody didn't decide it, they could ask a court to review what we did, or the village board could say, these guys have over. But if you feel that this is where this comes out. Do it. I mean,
Because I don't think that. I think that Alex was right to make this decision.
Yes.
I think that by the letter of the law, he possibly even made the correct decision.
do you think subordinate means that he's looking at 50%?
I think that how he looked at it, which is what is subjective, could be looked at differently to where it does fit.
It's not,
There's
it's
a
not
couple-
completely obvious, because if it was, we wouldn't be here and talking about this.
It's
So
not the typical
completely
home
obvious.
occupation.
And
And that's-
if we were to limit the hours, I mean, it's going to be that granular. I'm gonna give you 100, I would say 192 hours a year of operating time. I don't know what happens if they go over that. I don't know how we
And no one
enforce
would
that and how that happens.
So zoning violation, building inspector.
I don't think that we should.
No, I mean, I think we could say that,
Assuming that number makes sense.
I don't think so either.
I think it is, as long as the number makes sense, because that is what zoning boards do with a lot of decisions. You could.
No,
It's not every single problem. We've got appeal, so I'm interested in.
Saying-
we want to do it Right, but,
right.
you know, that's the box.
That- To overturn Alex's. Based on the fact that he didn't take into
consideration
consideration the factors that
That they're
it
only
operates a
gonna-
maximum of 196 hours a year and 3 cars or 5 cars or whatever cars.
Well, that's what we would have to impose if we could, but he's.
But if
He's
we
the-
wouldn't be imposed, we would be saying that
This is
we
not-
think that's why he gave the wrong answer.
We have to say,
Well,
or are we saying this is what we think defines a home?
Yes, I think that's how you would word it.
That'd
This
be
is how
great,
we,
but
what
then
we
we're
think
kind of
defines
legislating.
secondary subordinate.
And I think the way you would leave it is that we think this is a home occupation if it's less than 190 whatever hours a year. And if they were to come back and start,
But I
Just
have-
for Variance, if somebody came here for a variance, we could put on whatever conditions. we
yeah,
want.
and that's why this is
Easy.
tricky.
We could have the cars, we could have everything. Problem is, this is an appeal of a particular decision, and so if we start doing that, we're kind of legislating. But I'm not, by saying that, I'm not suggesting it's necessarily wrong. I'm still working through that. I think under the circumstances here, it would actually be the right thing to do in general, but whether we have, there'd be jurisdictional questions, but and the saving grace would be that the village, the mayor is there, and the village board could look at this and say, we don't want to do this, we think you've got it wrong, we're gonna legislate something else.
Can you save us some time, Tim?
I think if you draw some boundaries.
This way, it's not an enforcement issue. Like if you say, okay, you can do X amount of events or hours per year. This way, the building department is not keeping track, but you're just reporting out, like, this is our schedule, these are our hours. So there's like tons of transparency, and then you comply with.
And that falls within it.
The one thing I want to suggest is that, I'd like us to generalize whatever conditions we come up with as much as possible. Because there will be other home occupations that may not be an urban school, right? And so are we talking about limiting the visible parking? Are we talking about limiting the noise? Are we talking about limiting the hours that you'll be attracting all these people? Are we talking about limitations on the number of people in an absolute or per acre or something? I mean, whatever it is, I'd like to come up with some
Yeah,
principles. that we
so
can-
here,
And then the
yeah.
village board can take a look and say, okay, this one's good, this one's not good, and they can legislate around it. But we're clearly expanding the concept of the home occupation.
So I guess I'm-
The body language in the statute was something else, and that's, I think that, you're right, that's what Alex was reacting to. What do we want, how do we want to morph that, if at all?
So, yeah, I guess so that's I feel less comfortable being like, it is if this, you know, like it is a home occupancy if there's less than 200 hours a year, you know,
Here's a procedural question. Do you guys want to decide this tonight as far as we've come? Do you want to think on some more, see if we get another person to help us?
Oh, I definitely, if we can get this done tonight, I 100% want to do that.
Okay, I got my pen.
So-
I am here for it.
so this is, yeah, so this is like,
The problem is we
Because
still have to agree,
if
because
we-
if anyone disagrees, it's
That's right.
gone.
So
If-
we're trying to
So
get,
we're trying to,
if we focus on number 3.
why don't we go through 1 and 2, get those knocked out, and then we can go on 3? Because I think 1 and 2 are pretty cut and dry.
well, I feel like we did knock
We
those
can-
out.
Yeah, so why don't we go through 1 and 2?
Just so that we have it stated
So
that
it's
we're all
stated,
agreeing,
yeah.
okay.
Okay, and then we can hash out number
Just
3, and if we
clear-
disagree, at least we got.
Number one is whether there's any jurisdiction for Alex to have made his second decision. And number 2, which is kind of aligned with it, is whether the delay of 5 months constituted what the appellant calls and the courts call special facts, which tend to raise the village's actions into question because of.
So on the first one, I think we all agree that both building inspectors got new information and that they both, we think
They had the right.
they had the right idea
Right, yeah.
to weigh in.
You're rejecting the appeal.
Yes.
On that basis.
Yes, so I'd like to call a vote for that.
I'll make a motion that we're rejecting the appeal based on the idea that both building inspectors should not have weighed in on this question.
Particularly Alex.
You have to
We're
second.
saying that Alex.
That Alex should not have.
Yeah.
Okay, so we
Second.
second it. Everyone vote. Aye. Okay, it's unanimous. So that one's taken care of.
And the special facts which relates to delay as to whether the village did something inappropriate, which set up these, this situation where the second person coming basically kneecap this project.
With the information we have right now, I think all the timelines make sense. I don't think that I don't think the town was trying to do something nefarious.
I'd like to make a motion to reject this appeal on the basis of the town delaying this application.
Village and
the
rejecting
village.
the aspect of the appeal relating to special facts.
That's right. Thank you.
Okay.
That, what he said.
Yes, what he said. Okay, so I put a motion to vote.
That's my motion.
Okay,
Oh, so you seconded
okay,
that?
so let's vote.
Aye.
Aye, okay, it's unanimous. All 3 of us agree
No, I
that.
can write those up.
Okay, good. Okay, so
Let's
now we're
go-
down to the
let's go
third
with-
one.
So for this, maybe I would request that before the vote, board actually votes to take action, that maybe do a straw vote to give us an idea of how you're feeling. And if you're not unanimous, then we would request to come back when you maybe have a
Right.
4th member.
That seems fair. I gotta say though, that currently my vote would be almost strictly based on the wording of the,
Yeah,
The code?
no, of the situation, like how they word,
Conditions.
yeah, of the conditions of the motion.
Right, how.
Oh, that was.
Right,
Yeah.
what is-
The most.
Like how the motion is worded. Is crafted, because if the question were asked of me right now, is this a home occupancy? My vote would be no. But I think that this could be worded in a way
I think.
to where it could
you
at least go to
should
the board.
Request us to do this.
Well, or a motion could be that we're making a motion to overturn Alex's decision. Right? Is that the thing?
What I'm thinking is there's 3 possible types of motions here. One is to sustain Alex's decision. One is to just reject it and send them to the planning board and let the planning board figure it out. One is to reject it so long as the application stays within certain parameters, which would define it as a home occupation. And then you would define the parameters.
See, I don't want to define the parameters. I want to say, these are the parameters I use to make this decision.
Well, we'll do that too.
I think you're saying the same thing.
Well, kind of. I don't want to tell the board that it should be
No.
197 hours. I want to say that I think the reason Alex's decision may have been incorrect is because he didn't take into factor.
At the end, that's what, we can do a lot of that, but at the end of the day, they need to know whether they're allowed to go to the planning board.
Right.
And that's,
So-
and that's gonna determine whether their project is consistent with the zoning of a home
So
occupation.
I guess
And
I
we need to
like,
do that.
I would phrase it somewhere along the lines of that if rejecting Alex's, which would allow them to go to the planning board.
Okay, then it was just either outright or under certain, like with certain.
I don't want to say. So I guess this is a legality thing, but like, so you're probably telling me that exactly what I'm trying to figure out, but. I guess like if I were wording the motion, I would say that I request a motion to reject Alex's call based on the fact that he may have not considered the 196 hour and 5 car, 5 visible car minimum.
And this.
So I think that maybe he made the wrong call because he didn't take these things into consideration.
Well,
Maybe that doesn't matter.
the hours, although I think the number's wrong, the hours, I think that he had that, and he just didn't, that was the appellant's argument, he rejected that. So we're okay saying, we think he's wrong by rejecting the hours, and we're gonna take into account the limited. But the 5 cars he never had, that was not a thing for him. That's something I just actually mentioned it.
Yeah, and 5 might not be the number.
So
No,
no,
it's
it's
not.
not.
It's not.
He had 41, he had parking for 41 cars. So that's why I'm saying at that point, if we want to legislate, we want to come up with an interpretation, we can do that, but.
No,
that's
if you were asking us to vote, how would you word what I'm?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it as I'm listening to you, and it would be something, it would be as simple as we could make it.
Well, simple is either to uphold them or to
Overturn.
overturn it.
Yeah, we return his decision
Then they just go to the planning
Then
board,
let the planning board
whatever
work
their
it out.
application is.
and let them deal with all the details.
And they absolutely will, because that's their role.
That's literally what they do.
Yeah.
And we don't have to explain why we
Well, you say
overturn.
you-
Well, and that's where it gets, yeah.
Now, if you overturn it, you're implicitly, you're relying on their representations of the numbers of hours, numbers of cars, everything else.
Sure.
And that's what they would be legitimized in doing, going to the planning board.
Yeah.
And that'd be it, yeah, they could. that's
But
what-
he
that's
was
what they
given
want.
that information also.
What?
He was given all of this information.
But you'd be telling him he's wrong, and
Yeah.
so you're telling him that as long as they have a certain number of cars.
So it really doesn't matter if I say, based on the fact that it's a minimum amount of hours or 8 weeks or whatever he
You
knew.
already know all this.
Yeah.
But what he didn't do was he didn't hear from the
You're
neighbors.
doing two things. You'd be
That is
rejecting
not-
his rationale. which
See
is
how
that
we
he's-
actually did. Chrissy, actually.
Right, you were looking around. I don't think you knew who was
Oh.
talking.
I didn't know.
What were you saying?
If you overturned Alex's determination, you're doing two things. You are, one, rejecting his rationale, which is a maximum number of the 50% occupancy of the house. That's just not a thing. You're telling him he's wrong. And also the fact that he's worried about the parking. You're telling him that's not a thing, at least in this case. You're wrong about that. And the second thing you're doing is you're just telling them, go to the planning board based on your application. It's okay, he's wrong, you can go to the planning board.
So if they
what-
go to the planning,
They will go to the planning board.
the planning board, so if we reject it, they go to the planning board.
You're telling the planning board, this is a home occupation.
And then the planning board will,
Evaluate.
Set limits on
parking and
hours,
uses.
parking.
so is it possible for them upon evaluating the information to go, no, it's not?
No.
Not based on, no, no,
Yeah.
it's a, they can use planning board parameters like designing the parking, et cetera, but you'd be saying this is a home occupation. Alex said this is not a home occupation. If you overturn him, you're saying this is a home occupation. It is that simple.
Corey said this is,
Yeah.
Alex said this isn't, we would be
And we
saying
have to say whether it is or.
it is or it isn't.
Bearing in mind,
I wish one of these legal ones were, those are.
I know.
bearing in mind that it is a home occupation because it's only 8 weekends a year, because.
Well.
Did you have something you wanted to add? in the
We say it's a home
conversation?
occupation, then it fits into that parameter.
Easement and and what
Local
a number of other people have made about code should be taken in consideration, and I haven't heard you mention all of what some people have mentioned in their public comments, either written or spoken today, and also just how important it is to recognize this is farmland and we're using it less than Huguenot Street Farms, and that's activity, and it's ruled by an easement, and that's how we came onto the property, and that's who we contacted, and we fit in those categories of home occupation, and that's what is outlined in the easement, that there is home occupation allowed on the property.
I'm gonna agree with half of that.
You could read the easement and see that.
I actually read that letter, and let me tell you what my take is on that. I think that, at the beginning, I asked folks to just comment on the law, and a lot of them came and said, we're happy with this. And I think that is important, because part of the body language of the home occupation is to not negatively impact the neighborhood, and that's of some value. As far as comparing it to farms and things like that, I don't think that should be in the forefront of your mind, because what should be in the forefront of your mind is that you are weighing in on the definition of a home occupation. You're telling the CEO what he should and shouldn't be looking at. And the same logic will be applied to a lot of other places. So that's really, this relates more to, they've chosen apparently not to try for the agricultural use relationship, but this is now a home occupation, and that's going to define what somebody could do on Prospect.
Yeah.
We
So
didn't try, we were ruled as home occupation, so that's the role we went. We thought that was the simplest way, just to make that clear.
We're here. Whether that's simple or not, you're seeing.
There's nothing simple about this. There's absolutely nothing simple about this.
I would look at it more natural for the agricultural type of thing, for exactly the reason you said. That's 181 Huguenot. Home occupation could be, 55 Millbrook.
That's the Walker Valley Land Trusts.
And
guys, I understand, I understand you're under a trust, but it doesn't really affect us here. It has nothing to do with us. Like, you're talking about the trust. The trust gave them some money and they do their deal. It has nothing to do with our law. It's just another law, another hurdle you have to go through. It has nothing to do with us.
This decision is going to reflect this aspect of the code throughout the village. In terms of parking, in terms of people, in terms of time.
And also, I respectfully just want to say one other thing that is very different that was said in the use variance and a number of, this is not a regular house even on Huguenot Street. This is 10.5 acres in the village, but 90+ acres in the town. It is, these two were protected, and they have a very different quality. So it is not the same as a regular house. It's the size of the house too is very different.
I don't know if that played.
Yeah, well, but we, right.
Let me ask this. Do we think that we have 3 board members who could be on board with calling it a home occupation with some wording of a resolution to approve? Could it be worded in a way where you would feel comfortable?
Another legal question. We overturn this and we keep talking about how this changes the way that the home occupancy is framed.
Why you keep talking, once you overturn it, your work is done.
No, I understand that, but so that this would frame home occupation for our code. So
certain aspects of it.
How individual can each of these each of these parts be looked upon. Like, so if we're saying this is a home occupation, now home occupations, someone can, like, can 20 people?
This is a home occupation because.
Yeah.
Right. Every application is different characteristics.
But
So
because it's gonna lay out some rationale. which may or
My
may not
point is there's almost no other circumstance where you could have me leaning towards saying that it's a home occupation with 50, 60 people. Like, I can't think of another
you're
scenario. And
that's.
so that's
It's the same as
where,
catering hall.
like, if I'm like fitting it
Bed and
into,
breakfast.
Well, you complete my sentence. This is a home occupation because.
Allowed.
in this
because of the
situation,
minimal,
Because it's under 200 hours.
right?
Minimal time frequency of it.
minimal time frequency,
Let me-
minimal,
Suppose they had 150 hours of outdoor concerts.
yeah, and that's where,
That's too much, that would be ridiculous.
but then it wouldn't be a
So
home
because-
occupation because it's not what you
because-
said, the-
And something else.
And it's a large property.
And for this instead of for that.
But the,
noise
but the
factor.
inside the house is already tied in, like that already exists in a home occupation,
Well, it says it in the code, but there's a,
primary structure.
if this was all inside the house, nobody would ever see it.
Right.
Yeah, it's not gonna
But
only
not
be in
there.
the house too. It's gonna be outside too.
And Alex didn't comment on that.
Yeah.
He either that or he channeled that in the way that you were suspecting that into the 51%.
Yeah.
Are you saying that people are seeing us outside? Because people have commented, numerous people on their own, just saying that they don't even know we're there and unless they see the shoes, like that.
No, I was saying that
About how your teachers have said multiple times that they've walked the property with their students and pointed out all the various fauna and all the stuff that's on the property. And you've also told us multiple times that the reason you like this property is because of the outside. Because if it was just a structure, this would be a completely different story. And you've made it very clear that you're gonna walk the property with the people, which is against what the code is.
I think maybe there's a difference between having classes outside and people.
If classes outside, you're no longer inside the
Right.
domicile,
And
so you're not
yeah,
longer,
I agree.
you're no longer that you're breaking the law. I mean, that's what it says.
Just throwing an idea out there, just to get started, please. Kind of moving along. This is a home occupation because Alex was wrong to focus on the 51% indoors, and all the outdoor activities are non-motorized and non-amplified. Let's start with that concept. Does that work?
I think you have to add in the duration. To me, that's where it's.
Yeah, the
not just
hundred, the
51%.
under 200 hours.
Because it's a limited duration and the outdoor activities are non-motorized, non-amplified, and we don't care about the 51% indoors.
Well, he wasn't taking the outdoor activity.
No, but this is where we're legislating kind of, this is where we're adding on some
Yeah.
concepts that can be used to justify it and to tell.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
If-
This is like. our
yeah,
gut
if we
check.
said,
His gut check, our gut check.
but,
No, I didn't mean to decide, I just meant to throw an idea out that we can work with.
yeah, so I
think
guess
if we
that,
have if we have 200 hours.
if we go, because, like, that his
That's self-reported.
decision was wrong, because he didn't put enough weight on the minimal amount of hours, the minimal amount of parking, and the positive blah, 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 that it, has to the,
Courts do stuff like this all the
Yeah.
time.
That I
That's
think I
what
could
the
get
code
behind.
does. It's all.
if we specifically say that we are overturning it because we don't think that he put too much weight on this and not enough weight on.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would make.
Yeah,
me-
how do you feel
make me
about this,
well.
this looking at parking?
I wanna
He's
know
concerned with that as well.
what the number of hours is, what the number of cars is that you think is appropriate for us to put into this.
Sure, and I can send you our schedule.
Oh, no, I want to know
You
tonight.
wanna
so
know
we-
right-
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I
It's your
don't,
decision tonight.
yeah, I don't want to.
We can jump to next month. and we can go down.
No,
No, I mean, I think it's probably something like 300 hours and 20 cars. I mean, if I were in your position, that's what I would be asking for. And we'd be negotiating. It's like, okay, we're gonna get to 250 and.
We're getting 200 hours because that's what they originally wanted.
Yeah, you
They wanted
calculated-
eight hours times 3 times 8
No, you
We
did.
said
No,
3
they said 3 days.
days.
of 9 hours.
You didn't say, they didn't.
They didn't say.
Okay, well, you're gonna have to give me an answer of how many hours.
Maybe we can take a minute to
Take
to discuss that.
Take a minute.
Okay.
Okay, because that's 216. And
Well, you take a minute, tell us how many hours and how many cars you want
Sure.
us to write.
Thank you so much. So
I'll say like an hour and a half.
And may I ask a question? Is the concern is the cars can be,
Oh, can there be conversation?
I'm happy to listen.
I'm just asking. I just want to clarify. You're concerned about how many cars it can be seen from the street, right?
That's my suggestion, but I don't know where they're at.
Yeah, which is really easy to say because,
Parking in the back?
well, if there was like a need, like we haven't had that, but we just always wanted somebody, maybe there's an extra person that has to be on a wheelchair, or we got a pregnant person, very, about to give birth. Like we have them parked by the barn. So and it's completely hidden from view.
That's the.
And so, and that actually has 40 spots. So the question whether it's in the town or the village is part of the same property. So like we have a
Also,
ability.
we'd be asking you to do something in the town, so we may not have
No,
to.
that all is in the village.
I'm sorry, I'm making it complicated. It's actually, it's not even an issue. I was complicating it. I
How many
apologize. So how many could be in view? I would say like a normal family in a house, like a big house of 4,000 square feet, would probably be about 5 cars. Like having a party.
You have
If
seven
Amber
bed-
had
you
some
have
people to
seven
visit, she would have, like.
Rules about how many parking spots per bedroom, and I think it's like the number of bedrooms plus 1 or 2, I don't know.
Well, that's for apartment. For apartment. Yeah.
Yeah, have seven.
Because it's 2 for the first 2, and then, because we had this on.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's 2 for the first 2 and then 1 for every addition. So it's 1 per bedroom. How many bedrooms are in the house?
Because you're just thinking if you have.
7 bedrooms.
Hold on, I have to think about
Pretty
this.
sure.
How many bedrooms are in? 7 bedrooms.
Yeah, so it's
So I
just
think
the
you
house
can-
alone is allowed 7.
I think the house alone is allowed 9, right?
No,
it's
it's
two-
2 for the first 2.
Oh,
So,
2 spots.
yeah, that means if it's a 1 bedroom, they still get 2
Yeah,
spots.
it's 5 bedrooms is 5, 10 is 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we're probably looking at like the 10 to 20 range rather than the 5 to 10, assuming that that is.
Well, you said that's what you.
So it's, I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
I would never, I mean. It's great to allow 10 to 20 cars. We're still not gonna be.
Yeah, but it's
Using many people.
But like, let's say
If-
Amber
if-
has a
if I'm
party,
in your
we would
position,
want to
what
be
I
able
would be
to
trying
have.
to do
the
is
cars
put
parked
limits
there.
that you will never hit.
Well,
Yeah.
On both, whatever
There's
parameters we're
plenty-
putting in,
there's
like,
plenty of
they're well above whatever
space, how many
you are
spots
considering,
are there?
Okay.
and you could envision.
There's, I don't know how many delineated spots there are, but it's basically a clear cut 10 acre lot, so.
Of grass,
Yeah.
grass.
Put those that are well above where you think we would get to. So that's like 20 cars.
So in other words, if there was essentially a limit.
I would say, but if the language is, we don't want to see more than, 10 cars.
Just give yourself.
Like 7.
I don't say it, I don't.
Okay, so 20 cars.
Yeah, like, just
Write that in this language, this is just the dialogue.
But so for this language, if we said he
One
did.
other option I want to run
I
by
would say,
you,
which is actually like, if we have to
pretty
cancel
solid,
one
so I just
day.
thought of
we
it.
might have to- Right?
Are we back in?
Are we back?
Yeah, we need to get back.
So we're just talking to our lawyer about what's
So we
happening.
can do-
Yeah.
So we say
They're doing
24
that.
days, we add a couple more days.
one option that's available to the board is to overturn Alex's decision and then instruct the planning board to take.
Can we,
deal with
can we
this
go
issue.
to, can we go to executive session with our lawyer right now?
It's not, it would. it
Yeah,
would be-
let's do that. Let's go there. Yeah,
Oh, yeah, we have to.
yeah, oh, we got a motion. Well, I motion we go to an executive council with our lawyer.
I'll second.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, what's.
Is there a room here?
No, it's fine.
We can clarify the hours.
They're gonna come back in a minute, they're gonna speak with their attorney, so.
So is that fair to say, so we're gonna aim high with 20 cars and then we're doing 10 hours for the 8 weekends, 3 days, it's 240, but we like just added 10, just to be on the safe side, so 250 hours of the whole goddamn year
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
in 20 cars.
And if we happen to not, like, let's say there was a blizzard or something like that, we canceled the day, we could do it on another day or something.
Yeah, it's just random.
Yeah.
Right. And if Autumn,
But if you use all the days.
Amber does want to have a party, or something, then that's not the home occupation. That's something else. So.
So, yeah, and if we had a party that's on home occupation, it's just a party.
Right,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
our living.
Right.
I don't know how much,
Sounds like
8,760 there, yeah.
How many minutes? is it?
Yeah, I don't know if that's the word, but I know the tune.
I think that's really helpful, you know, just to
You know,
see
it's
how,
also allow for graduation.
yeah.
fit, so I'm having more issue with that. Is that if I have to force it,
By doing this negotiation, as soon as we started talking about it and said it out loud, we're realizing that this is not fitting what it is. As soon as we say, oh, you can only do this many hours, you can only have this many cars, you can only have this, we were basically
brings us back to our
defining, yeah,
initial
we're,
question.
we're going back to the original thing where it's not what it is.
I don't have the same view of,
Yes.
as my fellow board members on this topic. And it's
Yes.
the point that I have more flexibility on interpretation of what we mean by home occupations. And so we're not in agreement because of sort of how we are interpreting and how we're reading the.
Okay. But we don't want you to, if you have another person here, then you can get a majority. If you have three of us, you need all of us. And that's why we're trying to get another person.
I'm struggling between what I think is the correct answer of my interpretation, and then like that would be what I would call like my gut, and then my heart, because I want there to be a way for this, but when we start putting amendments on it, then it takes away the initial question of me of, does it fit into this frame? If we have to.
Well, and
it's not for
my
us.
take on it is that the simplest thing that we could do is say we're overturning Alex's decision and sending them to the planning board, like, and then let the planning board deal with whatever provisions they choose to impose. That way, we could not make a determination at that point on whether this is or is not a home occupation. We could just overturn his decision, right? We don't have to give a reason. It would be helpful for Alex to have a reason,
Well, I think Alex had his reasons.
but it would be helpful for him to hear our reasons on why we overturned his decision.
Well, we'll write it, well, if we're overturning his decision.
We might not know.
We'll write a decision. We'll have the reasons, so will everybody else.
Yeah, okay.
We're gonna tell them it's wrong about parking, we're gonna tell them it's wrong about,
Square footage.
square footage.
Yeah.
Those are the two bases. As for the other things that we do, it's a struggle for us to even do it, and we have one member that thinks that it's wrong to do, and one member that we have a yes, no, and maybe, and it's.
Yeah,
we're-
yeah, that's the best way to put it.
Yeah, yes, no, maybe, and one of the things I really don't like is when we're down to three people, that it has to be anonymous, and that's like against my interpretation of what government should be. And I'm begging my neighbor to come, and she's begging her neighbor to come, and we're trying to fix the problem. And if
Also,
Tony's
she
here.
was on the zoning board. Well, he's just traveling.
He's
So,
traveling.
and the rules for the government, the state government, are that you have to be present in the space. And so we can't actually have him weigh in on and vote without him. He can attend meetings, but he,
And technically, because of the size of our board, we need three to make decisions. So like this is a completely legal, like we could vote right now. Right.
But you want-
the
we
hard
appreciate
side
your-
of us is
well, so I know.
Yeah, that's what I want to
know
do.
that the other person
You know,
who's currently on.
But I
the
want to
board
do, but
is not to be here next month and will be here in the following 2 months. So I
But
know,
if somebody came onto the board for next month.
oh, could they weigh in on
Would
this?
we
Could
have
they
to
vote on
explain
this?
all of this?
I mean, that's up to your attorney, but I believe as long as they reviewed everything, they probably could.
Down on the board, we could. The question is propriety, and obviously, this board has heard a lot. We've had,
It'd be very hard to
substantial
replicate. And
public
this is why I'm
But they-
pushing on, I really want us to actually make a decision tonight if we could,
Yeah.
because
I
this
mean-
is so complicated. And even for me to have to think it all through again later feels like more taxing than I would like it to be.
I'm just, like I said, I just don't like that one of us can.
I don't think a resolution would pass tonight.
And we certainly don't want to come back, but we would rather come back with the chance of getting an approval than get a no vote tonight. So
Okay.
because it's a 2-1, so.
Okay.
We appreciate you guys being honest with where you're at right now, and with that, we'll request.
Have you guys considered going the agricultural route instead of the home occupation route?
We've looked into it. We could, I guess, raise that again.
I'm interested in why Corey steered you in the direction of a home occupation? And you can see what the
It was the village board of trustees that told us the agricultural route and the ruling of but then meanwhile, Corey ruled us as a home occupation, and they chose to just allow that because it just seemed probably simple to them. The village board of trustees.
Board of trustees.
So they,
I don't think they made a
they
determination.
didn't make a determination, but those who we were talking
Okay,
to
all
about the agricultural use and
Okay,
cetera.
so, I'm gonna put a motion to close the meeting.
Do we have to? Yeah, we have to
We have to
adjourn
adjourn.
or something, but.
Well, is there any other business like minutes or anything like that?
No, we did that already.
What's up?
Motion to adjourn the meeting or motion to adjourn the application for tonight?
We don't have anything else, do we? Yeah, this is the agenda.
So we're gonna have a motion to adjourn this meeting till next month. Okay. And
Although we still know that our fourth member will not be here.
Well, maybe I'll reach out to Mr. Gordon in the interim, but I think the other member can vote via Zoom if the three of you are here, if a quorum is here in person.
He's an experienced person, he's the former chair,
Former
so he, you know, he will start.
I mean, that's who the other member. Oh.
Yeah.
What?
All right, so maybe we're better to just come back when we know he's gonna be here in person.
Yeah, we're not gonna get a motion passed tonight.
Yeah.
And a motion that doesn't pass is not a denial, it's just a motion doesn't pass, so that's where we're at anyway, whether we take the vote or not. It's not gonna happen tonight. And it would have been inappropriate to pressure the members any more than we did, actually. It just wasn't gonna work, and it was, that's what it is.
So should we adjourn to May then? Is that,
Yeah.
Well, this is March,
But we're not gonna, we know that Tony won't be here in
so
April.
well, what about the village board? Are they gonna come up with somebody?
I don't know, I could ask
Wait,
in the
they,
back there.
they can sit on?
Tim, is anybody gonna be on this board next month who's not currently on this board? In your estimation at this moment?
No, I mean, we have a really solid candidate, but it's not gonna happen.
I have a candidate.
But even then it takes.
How long does it take to get them on?
You have a candidate, we can appoint them tomorrow at the board meeting.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. What? Carrie, my neighbor. Carrie?
Okay, but you're saying
Um,
it could happen if somebody showed up tomorrow with a resume. You guys could have a conversation and vote. Okay,
Okay,
We can adjourn until next month and then pull it from the agenda.
yeah,
if we don't
right,
have
and then
it.
if we don't have a
let's
person.
do that.
let's do that.
It's possible.
Oh, boy.
Okay,
Wow, guys, this feels like a marathon.
Yeah.
it was, it's rough.
Yeah.
Okay.
what's next month?
I know. Can we squeeze it out? Can we squeeze out something?
Get two
So
votes. We'll get
unsatisfying.
2 more votes for the project.
It would be the second Tuesday would be the 9th, right?
April?
April 9th. So I would like to have a motion to adjourn this case until April 9th meeting.
Make a motion.
Second.
I'm
Okay,
very sad about the
We'll watch
motion.
I know, I'm sorry. Sorry. I'm just like, yeah, okay. And I motion to close the meeting.
I'll second the motion. We're closing.
Yep. Okay, we're done.
Well, at least we voted on something.
Thank you, everyone.